Year, the two top things I hear all the time, the right kind of growth and talent, where we're going to find future talent. So not terribly different from what you said. Good to be with you this morning. I spent most of my life on your side of the table. I had to privilege to lead 3 public companies, from about a $300 million auto auction business to a $1.5 billion chemical distribution business. And then I got really tired of large public bureaucratic red tape filled slow decision-making big companies, and I went and started 3, and they were a whole lot more fun than all the big companies rolled together. Started Alampi and Associates about 18 years ago, and we do one thing: we help CEOs get from vision to execution and results. So my goal today is to give you some thoughts and tools you can take back and use in your company if you choose to help on the execution and results front. You've got a hard copy of the slides. Everything that I'm going to refer to today to be a bunch of articles and other things, I've already sent to Frank and asked him to send it all to you, so you'll have everything we're going to talk about. And last, this is not a 3-hour ear banger, because I can't talk that long and you wouldn't want me to anyway. So stop me, interrupt me, and let's talk about things that are relevant to your companies and organizations. I met Vistage in a way nobody in this room ever did, I can guarantee it. I was coming out of the worst board meeting I'd ever had in my entire life. I hated all my directors. I was convinced they were total bozos and had no clue on how to run a business. And as I got in my car and I was fuming, I turned the ignition on and a voice came out of the radio, and the voice said, "Are you a CEO? Are you lonely? Is there nobody you can talk to that doesn't have an agenda?" I thought, wow, I don't know who this is. I got to join this organization. It was a Vistage radio ad in Chicago. In 20 years, I've never heard another Vistage radio. So talk about being in the right place at the right time. Somebody was looking over my shoulder. But it's been great. I was a member in 2 different groups, Chicago first and then Detroit. And big part of my life, an important part of my life. The other thing that Frank didn't mention in terms of background, I think I've made every stupid possible mistake you can make as a CEO. So there we are. I mean, that's the way we learn, right? Okay. One way, exactly. So our theme today is real simple. Vision without execution is a hallucination. You know, why in the world do so many companies spend so much time and money doing beautiful strategic plans and they can't execute the plan? And we see hundreds of companies. I mean, every year we see companies that have beautiful plans. Trouble is, they're in a 3-ring binder gathering dust on somebody's shelf for about 11 months out of the year, only to be pulled out on December. How about that? Well, I mean, literally, we see hundreds of companies that have beautiful strategic plans. Trouble is, they're in a 3-ring binder gathering dust for 11 months out of the year, only to be pulled out on December 1st when somebody remembers there was a plan, and now there's only 31 days left to get it done. And you know, in my view, if that's the way it's going to work, I wouldn't waste the time or spend the money doing strategic planning. Because it isn't about the plan, it's all about execution and results. How do we actually get execution? So we'll talk a little bit about vision today, but much more importantly, my goal is to give you some thoughts on the execution and results side, okay? Oh, one other thing. When I got out of the Army, I went into sales, so I'm really comfortable with long, awkward silences where nobody speaks and whoever opens their mouth first loses. So when I ask a question, they're not meant to be rhetorical. I'd love a little feedback, all right? There we go. All right, thank you. That's good. All right, so our theme, 4 things I want to spend time with you on. First one you've never heard, something we call barriers to growth, and it's all about the totally predictable places where every entrepreneurial company in the world seems to get stuck trying to grow its business. It is so predictable where these natural barriers occur. When I meet a CEO for the first time, if he or she will tell me the kind of things their company is stuck on, I can almost always tell them what their head count is. And if you tell me what your head count is, I guarantee you I can tell you what you're stuck on. It's that predictable. But entrepreneurs hit these natural barriers, and the first reaction, unfortunately, usually is, oh, we screwed up, or we're broken, or we made a mistake. Probably not. You probably just hit one of those natural barriers that everybody's going to hit. The question isn't whether you're going to hit these barriers. The question is, how well aligned are you and your leadership team so when you hit them, you can get over them and back to profitable growth again? So I want to spend a little bit of time on where those natural barriers occur and why they occur. And then number 2, 3 really simple practical things, the Rockefeller habits, seem to make all the difference in the world at not getting stuck when you hit these natural barriers. 3, I want to spend a little bit of time on CEO and executive leadership. Kind of things we think CEOs and executives ought to be losing sleep over if you're going to lose sleep over anything. And it may be a little different perspective compared to the things you're losing sleep over today. And last, I'm going to introduce you to a document we created called the Execution Roadmap. One of the things that we've learned in the last 18 years of doing this kind of work, the companies that are really great at executing their long-term vision do it 90 days at a time. Little, tactical, bite-sized pieces. How many of you read Good to Great? Probably everybody, right? Jim Collins' Business Bible. Remember he talks about big, hairy, audacious goals 10 to 15 years out? I love BHAGs. But frankly, I don't have a clue how to execute against something 10 years out. It's too big, it's too far. We find most leadership teams can't even deal with one-year goals, let alone 15-year goals. The companies that we find are really great at execution, every 90 days they're asking themselves, so what are the 3 to 5 most important things our company has to do in the next 90 days? Which one member of our leadership team owns each of those deliverables? What's the specific goal and how are we going to measure it? Little tactical bite-sized pieces. So what we've done on this roadmap document, on one side we capture all the vision stuff, core values, purpose, mission, BHAG, hedgehog, but on the other side we set up a process, so every 90 days we're taking bite-sized pieces out of our one-year goals, and every 1 year we're taking pieces out of our 3-year goals. So we'll walk through the roadmap here this morning, you'll leave with a copy. Again, if you can use it in your company, that's great. Okay? Make sense so far?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, thank you. All right, so let's talk about these barriers because it really sets up everything else we're going to talk about. And if I get in your way, just tell me to move, okay? All right, let me give you this slide because you may be surprised at some of the data. There's about 30 million companies in the United States that file business tax returns. So these are C Corps, S Corps, and LLCs. Would you believe 96% of those companies have fewer than 10 full-time employees? Isn't that a mind blower? I mean, we read about all these big guys and they're in the press and the media. That's not what makes up the U.S. economy. 96% of all the companies that file a business tax return have fewer than 10 FTEs. This data, by the way, is right off irs.gov. It's an Excel spreadsheet. I've been downloading it for 10 years and the 96% number hasn't moved 1 point in either direction. So it's a pretty stable number. So this excludes not-for-profits. It excludes government because they don't file business tax returns. So these are businesses kind of like us, right? Trying to make a profit or do the things that we do. So if 96% have fewer than 10 FTEs, the rest of them, about 1 million companies, have more than that. About 140,000 of the 30 million companies have more than kind of 50 to 75 FTEs. It's a range. There's about 30,000 of the 30 million companies with more than typically 200 to 400, couple hundred FTEs. And at the upper end, all the big guys we read about, there's about 2,500 of those companies with more than 1,000 FTEs. And as you'd expect, the 2,500 companies are pretty much the Fortune Magazine 2000 list and the Forbes Private 500 list. So all the big guys that make the lists and get publicity. You see a dollar number on top of headcount represents revenue. But don't do what I'd do if I was sitting where you are in one of my Vistage groups. Divide the revenue by the headcount and compare the productivity to your company. Because as we all know, if you're a manufacturer, that's a totally different ratio than if you're a distributor, which is different than if you're a services firm. So that ratio of revenue to headcount is all over the map. We just picked a really gross approximation of revenue just to give people some idea what the size might be on something beside headcount. But the fascinating thing to me, of those two metrics, revenue is a lousy predictor of where these natural barriers occur. Headcount is a great predictor. So the more important number is the headcount number, and we'll come back and talk about that in a little bit. What do you think the brick things are? Oh, good, the graphics are working, this is good. And that's where they occur. And the one we see more often than any other one in Vistage companies and entrepreneurial companies, 50 to 75 FTEs. We see more companies stuck at that one than all 3 of the other ones put together. We see people stuck there 15 years. Hey, we got to 71 people and then we fell back to 58 and then we got to 63. There's something really tough about this one. But we'll talk about all 4 of them today and why people potentially get stuck there. It's also a great graphical picture of a book title I liked a lot by Marshall Goldsmith. What got you here won't get you there. You know, the very things we do to get our companies to one of these brick walls are exactly the wrong things to do to get to the next one. It is never more of the same. And it starts with our ability as leaders to reinvent ourselves, maybe reinvent our leadership team, maybe reinvent the whole company. But whatever got us to one of these won't get us to the next one. It's different stuff. And you all know the corollary to that that's unfortunate. Some of the people who got you to one of these can't get you to the next one. You know, that's the only guarantee I have ever found after running 3 public and 3 startup companies. Jobs will always outgrow people. Always. Not whether, when, including us. And it doesn't make them bad people, but jobs will always outgrow people. That A or B player that you brought on board that was a superstar, at some point may become a C player through no fault of their own. The job outgrew the individual. We'll spend some time on that. The other thing I sometimes get asked when people look at this slope, they say, well, this implies that I'm growing my company. Who said I have to grow my company? Why can't I just have a lifestyle business and take distributions and enjoy life and all? Do whatever you want. I don't make any assumptions at all. But it's a little bit like what children learn when they play video games the first time. The first thing kids learn playing video games, the guy that stands still gets killed first. So I have never found standing still to be one of the great business strategies. Usually we're either growing it or we're shrinking it, but if I'm standing still, I'm actually going backward. There's somebody probably going by me while I'm standing still. So for the purposes of this morning, when I talk about growth, I mean intelligent, profitable growth, not wild and crazy or stupid growth, okay? Questions about the graphics? Make any? Okay. Barriers fall into 3 categories. Again, totally predictable. Leadership and leadership skills, starting right with owner, founder, CEO. And the number 1 leadership skill of all that we see that brings companies to a grinding halt, delegation. I don't even know what number 2 is. It's so far behind delegation it doesn't even make the radar screen. Companies that don't get really good at delegation, starting with us, almost never get beyond 50 to 75 employees. Because the entire senior team is so involved in the business, nobody's spending any time on the business. And that is the single most common thing we find when we go into an organization, that there are a whole bunch of people that can work in the business. It's a relatively small number that can truly work on the business. And if the senior team isn't working on the business, nobody is. Okay, we'll come back and talk about delegation, because it is the single most important leadership skill that tells us whether a company is positioning for growth or not. Number 2, infrastructure, office space, warehousing, manufacturing, technology systems. We see more entrepreneurial companies that get tripped up by a big technology system project, a CRM or an ERP system, because we don't do them every day. And when we hit that wall and have to engage in a project, who's on staff within the company that's done it multiple times and knows how to mitigate the risk and control the cost? And that technology system phase for a company, that can be you bet the company, as we all know. I mean, the world is littered with people that started at a big ERP project and never came out the other end. So we'll talk a little bit about technology systems and how to mitigate that risk. And 3, business focus. What you focus on at $1 million company is a whole lot different than at $10 million, which is really different than $50 million. So at every one of those brick walls, we've got to keep reinventing ourselves as owners, founders, CEOs, and start focusing on different things to take the company to the next level. Now, I would never try to tell you there might not be some other factors in here, but you know, in the 18 years we've been doing this work, we haven't found a company yet in 18 years that didn't get stuck for one or more of those 3. It's amazing how predictable it is. We see the same things over and over and over again. There may be some other factors, but in 18 years, we just haven't run into them. Okay? Questions? Comments? Tell me I'm all wet? Huh? Okay. So let's talk about leadership, because it's really the most important of the 3 barriers, and it's where everything starts. So we don't have a Ralph in the room. Ralph is my entrepreneur of the day. Old Ralph decides he's going to go start a brand new company from scratch. He's got no people, he's got no revenue, he's got nothing. So he goes out and interviews his first 9 FTEs, personally interviews them, does a deep dive in the interview process. He gets to know who their spouses are, how many kids they have, where they vacation, what their hobbies are. So it's that tight-knit little startup environment most of us have probably gone through at one time or another. Typically, those first 9 people, nobody has any titles because everybody does everything. If it's a big shipping day, everybody packs boxes. If it's a big order day, everybody's entering orders. So there's not a lot of functional specialization to speak of, but it's a real simple org chart. 9 people all report to Ralph. So Ralph's the Wizard of Oz. You know, you have a question in that company, go ask the boss. He has the answer to every question anybody could possibly answer. 2 attributes of that startup environment most of us probably remember. There are no business processes defined whatsoever, and every day is pure chaos. But you know, chaos can be fun up to a point. You know, your heart's beating every day trying to keep up with quality issues and customer issues. And what we find is startups can get to that first brick wall in chaos mode. There is no way they can get to the second one. Because after the first one, the complexity of the business starts to cave in around Ralph's ears. So this first brick wall is really a crisis of business management. Somebody's got to emerge in that startup who's got the ability to look at the business, not where it is, but what are we going to have to do differently if we ever hope to get to the second one? Oftentimes, the best business management head in a startup isn't the owner-founder. But who said it had to be? Anybody? I've never read anything that said just because you own it, you have to be the best business manager. But somebody, out of those first 10 FTEs, somebody better emerge who's got a skill of being able to look forward and start figuring out what are we going to have to do differently if we ever hope to get to the second barrier. Assuming that person emerges and Ralph and his team get over the first barrier, a couple things start to happen. Titles start to show up. People start to have functional responsibility. So sales, marketing, ops, finance, whatever it happens to be. It's also where silos start to get built. As people have functional ownership, they start to build walls around their function. And all you can do is pray that those walls are pretty thin, because at the next level, you're going to have to go in and knock all those silos down so you have good cross-company communication. So yeah, the silos are going to get built, but let's keep the walls pretty thin so we can tear them down again. It's also where hopefully old Ralph is a member of a Vistage group. Because if Ralph's never gone up this path before, he's about to hit the most challenging leadership issue he's ever going to face in his company. I mean, down here, Ralph had 9 direct reports. It might be a little heavy, but we could all deal with 9 at least on an interim basis. There's no way Ralph's going to have 50 to 75 direct reports, or he's going to be the log jam in the whole company. So if Ralph hasn't already figured it out, hopefully his Vistage group, acting like an advisory board, says to him one day, Ralph, you ever want to get to that next brick wall, you better start to hire some leadership talent. You need to start to build a leadership team. Well, Ralph knows how tough that's going to be. He needs that expensive talent here to get his company to the next barrier, but his income statement can't possibly afford all that leadership talent. When is it too soon to start bringing those leaders on board? When is it too late? If he moves too late, he may never get to the next level. And what's he supposed to look for when he hires those first leaders? People who have done the job in $1 million company, or people who have done the job in a $10 million company? And the more experience he hires for, the more expensive that talent's going to be. And what happens if Ralph hires the leadership talent, actually gets it on board, but doesn't change his own leadership style? You know, leadership style for a owner, founder, CEO in a startup, micromanagement. Totally appropriate. Ralph's got his thumb on the pulse of the whole company, looks at every order, knows every invoice that goes out the door. Totally appropriate in startup mode. But now Ralph just spent all this money putting a leadership team in place. What happens if he continues to micromanage?
They leave.
Best case, he demotivates them. Worst case, he micromanages them right out of the company. Exactly. You know, you hired me to do a job, you don't give me the authority, you do end runs around me, you give direction to my people and don't tell me you did. So Ralph has got to reinvent himself as a leader and recognize what I used to do up to here myself, I've got a whole team of people I just brought on board to handle that. I've got to stop doing things myself and start doing things through the leaders that I just brought on board. That's a big transition. That's a hard transition. It's probably one of the reasons delegation is so darn difficult. How do you let go? How do you give up authority and control? How do you take a chance? And you know the word perfection and delegation don't go in the same sentence, ever. They're different issues. We'll come back and talk about delegation in a second. Assuming that Ralph and his team get over the second brick wall, now it's all about middle managers. You know, we're going to grow this thing to a couple hundred employees. I need a level below the senior leadership team level. Well, how do I find, recruit, hire, train, assimilate, and get productive a whole nother level of management we've never even had in our company before. And again, what do I look for in a middle manager? Middle managers who've operated in a $10 million business, or middle managers who've done it in a $50 million business. And again, when I hire these middle managers, am I supposed to look at them as potential senior leaders in the future, or are they going to peak and I'm going to have to keep bringing people from outside over top of them, which obviously doesn't enhance the promotion capabilities within the organization. So again, some really thorny issues as Ralph continues to try to build out this leadership team for the first time. Assuming that they master that, they figure it out and get over the third brick wall, now it's all about strategic organizational design. You know, over the last couple decades, there's been a real movement to broader spans of control, so more employees reporting to a single leader, but flatter org charts, fewer levels on the org chart. So hopefully information moves up and down pretty quickly without a lot of filtering. I mean, look at some of the large Japanese companies, multi-billion-dollar companies. Oftentimes only 5 to 7 levels between the CEO and the lowest level frontline employee. That's pretty flat for a multi-billion-dollar company. On the other hand, I think you probably won't be surprised, and I'm embarrassed to admit, that I found a US public company not too long ago has 17 levels in the org chart. Can you imagine what it's like at the bottom of that mess? If you ever get information that isn't timely, it's been filtered about a gazillion times, but that's in our control. We can do things to make sure we keep it broad and flat so that we can be agile and responsive and flexible. So we can control what that org chart looks like as we design it for the future. Excuse me. There's also a neat little resource, I don't know if any of you use it, called the Conference Board in New York City. And any company can join. I think it's a revenue-based dues structure or something. But one of the things I like about the Conference Board, they've got something like 12 to 1,500 org charts for all kinds of companies around the globe. So if you were thinking about building a customer service department or function, and you were curious, how do other companies that are best in breed design that as part of their org structure? You could go pull the org chart of a company that's pretty well known for customer service, let's say. LL Bean, they've got a reputation for being pretty good at customer service. You could pull their org chart and see, where does it report in the organization? What are the hard lines? What are the dotted lines? How did they structure it? So you could do some interesting benchmarking pretty economically without having to hire a bunch of consultants to do it. Conference Board in New York City. Comments, questions about this? Does this make any sense? This whole leadership thing? So I made this big deal about delegation. Why is it so difficult? Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's a piece of cake for you guys. Why is delegation so difficult? This is the part where you talk.
Nobody can do it as well.
I could do it better or faster than anybody else up to a point. That won't always be the case, but up to a point, it's true. I can. What else?
Feel like they're going to lose touch with it.
Yeah, I'm going to lose touch. I'll lose control of it once I give it. Yeah, absolutely. What else?
Patience.
Patient, you're waiting for it to happen.
Oh, it drives me crazy. Yeah, let me just parachute in. I'll take it back and do it myself, right? Death move. You can never take it back. What message do you send that person when you get impatient and jump in and take it back? What message do you send to that individual?
You're just going to do it every time. It's reverse delegation.
If the boss gives me something and I can just stall long enough, he'll take it back and I'll never have to do it.
It's reverse delegation.
You cannot ever take it back. What else? What else makes delegation so hard?
You might not be needed.
I had a CEO the other day in a group. He said, if I delegate a lot of what I'm currently doing, I won't look so CEO-ish. What? Your whole image is hung up with hanging on to. He was serious. He said, I won't look like the CEO. What else?
They don't ever do it like you would.
They can't do it. Does it take longer or
It's the
shorter?
right way, right?
Does it take longer or shorter when you delegate?
Initially, it takes longer.
The first time to explain it and implement it, but after that, you ought to gain something from it, right? Yeah. How about startup mode? I look over my shoulder to delegate and there's nobody there. I only have 9 FTEs and they're going 100 miles an hour. Who am I going to delegate to? What else? Anything else? Makes it hard? Well, you got most of them. Let me take you back a lot of years. I had just been appointed CEO of this $1.5 billion public chemical distribution company. I had a brand new administrative assistant. Her name was Gail. Best admin I've ever had in my entire business career. It's the second day on the job, and it's as clear to me today as it was 20-some years ago. I walked into my office that morning. I grabbed some work off my desk. I went out to her workstation. I gave it to her. I said, Gail, would you take care of this for me, please? And before I could even get turned around, I hear Gail say to me, hold it, boss, hold it, hold it, hold it. I have a question. Oh, okay, Gail, what's the question? Remember, I've known this lady one day at this point, brand new relationship. She looked me in the eye and she said, boss, which one of the other 25 things you've already given me to do does this new one replace? Or do you expect me to work overtime to get this done? Or should I lower the quality to get it done? This is a zero-sum game and it's your choice. God, I almost had a heart attack. Are you kidding me? Nobody had ever asked me those questions in my entire career. I didn't even know what to say to this lady. I mean, she literally blew me away. And then I realized she knew better than I that the single most important step in good delegation is taking the time up front to pinpoint exactly what the expectations were. This lady literally would refuse to do anything I gave her if I couldn't tell her where it fit on my priority list. Is it in your top 5, your second 5? What's the turnaround time that's required? We actually had a code system between the two of us. A meant I needed something on the same day. B meant within 3 days. C meant whenever she got to it. And you know, we worked together at that company for 7 years. We never had a single serious misfire between the two of us because she forced me to tell her right up front, here's what the expectations, here's what the turnaround time has to be. She knew everything she needed to know right at the beginning. But think about the way most of us delegate. Hey, Ralph, here's something I need you to do. Probably going to take you 90 days. Here's some resources. You got it? What's Ralph say 99% of the time when you ask him if he got it?
Sure.
He always says he's got it. We need to ask one more question at that moment. That's great, Ralph. Repeat back to me exactly what it is you think I just asked you to do. Repeat back to me exactly what it is you think I just asked you to do. Now, you know the first time you do that with somebody, they're going to be really insulted. Like, boss, you don't trust me anymore? This has nothing to do with trust. We can't afford to have our people going off and doing the wrong thing right. The wrong thing right. How many times when you delegate something, the person goes off and does a great job, but it wasn't exactly what I thought I asked them to do. They did the wrong thing, but they did it right. And you know, that's not their fault, that's ours. If I wasn't crystal clear in defining exactly what I was asking them to do, that's on me, it's not on Ralph. So taking that time to just ask that question, take 7 seconds. What are 3 things I'm doing today, Ralph? I had to delegate, I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. Repeat back to me exactly what it is you think I just asked you to do. Critical step of delegation, making sure that they don't go off and do the wrong thing right, okay? So, I mean, old Gail blew me away with that question, but boy, did it change the relationship we had and the way we got things done. There was a great book, probably the best business book I've ever read, and it's unfortunately out of print. You can't find it anyplace. I've been looking for a couple of years. It was called Managing Up. And the premise was, if you're smart, you'll manage your boss. You won't wait for your boss to manage you, you'll manage your boss. And when I read that, I can remember as a young captain coming out of the Army, I thought, you know, that's a pretty good theorem. So I got into a habit. And about every 2 weeks, I'd be in my boss's office with a 1-pager with the 25 things on my to-do list that I was accountable for, but I had always prioritized the top 5. Because I didn't want to go off and work on something for a couple weeks, only to come back to my boss and have him say, you idiot, you picked the wrong things to work on. So I wanted to be sure my boss and I were aligned right at the beginning, and then I'm going to go off and do those top 5 for sure, and then I'll be back in 2 weeks with a new list and my top 5 prioritized. Nobody teaches our employees to do that anymore. Nobody. They all think it's our job to set goals for them. No. It's their job to set goals for themselves. It's their job to bring it and confirm their goals and what they're going to work on with me, but it is not my job to set everybody's goals. That's the difference between A players and C players. A players demand accountability. They know the world is about accountability. I mean, that's why we have report cards in school. That's why we keep scoring athletic events. Notwithstanding T-ball, where you get a participation trophy. I don't know what kind of nonsense that is. Are you kidding me? A players will, if you have an A player working for you and you don't set goals for them, they'll set goals for themselves. They'll hold themselves accountable. C players, on the other hand, well, I was waiting for the information from Billy Bob and he was late and whine. A player versus C player. That book, I wish I could buy a copy for every single employee. I wish I had a bunch of Gales that would push back and not just accept what I told them, but they'd want to know all the other information they needed to know to even have a chance to be successful handling something. So this whole thing gets back to, making sure that we get the right people, and then we teach those people or let them be free to act like an A player should in an organization. Okay. So number one, pinpoint the expectations right up front. Number two, now that we're aligned in terms of what the goals are, I'm not going to sit here for 90 days hoping and praying that individual's getting it right. I want some feedback. I want some updates. And the feedback process I'm going to use totally depends on Ralph's proven ability to handle things that I've delegated to him. So if Ralph and I have worked together for a long time, he's demonstrated his ability, I've kind of tested him, maybe the only feedback I need is, Ralph, stick your head in my office about every 3 weeks and give me a 1-minute update on how this project is going. And that's all I need, because I have a high level of trust with Ralph. But if Ralph's a newbie, haven't tested him, hasn't proven his ability, hey, Ralph, I want a 5-minute sit-down report, 9 a.m. every Friday morning, my office. So I'm going to give Ralph a lot shorter length leash if he hasn't demonstrated his ability to actually handle things that I delegate to him. And that's one of the things that drives me crazy about people at our level. We got these yellow pads with 100 things that we've delegated to people, and we're wasting our time going around the company trying to get people to give us updates on where all those projects stand. Why is that on my list of to-dos? When I delegate something to Ralph, that's on his list of to-dos to bring me those updates. I'm not going to come chase him down. And the first time he misses one of those feedback sessions that I've asked for, he and I are going to have a different conversation about what accountability means in our company. Why should we have to chase people down to get feedback and updates? It's their job to bring it to me. People say, well, Jim, if you don't keep a list of what you delegated, how do you remember? I don't. I have to admit to you, I cheat once in a while and write down the big ones. But I don't keep a list of what I delegated to people. But when I do my management by walking around and I plop down into the chair in front of Ralph's desk, the first thing I'm going to say to him is, pull out the list of all the projects. Oh, you didn't keep a list? Next time I stop by, you best have a list. Why should we have to chase people down for updates? It's their job to bring us the updates. That's part of the deal, right? Let's see, CEO, clerk, who has the responsibility? I'm not chasing down people to try to get updates. So put the feedback process in place that's based on the individual's proven ability to handle things that you delegate. 3, how about risk tolerance? Every time we delegated, somebody said it could go wrong, it could hurt the company, there might be some exposure. Ralph needs to know what my risk tolerance boundaries are every time I delegate something to him. So think about it almost like a QC chart. There's the end point. That's where I want Ralph to drive this project. That's the goal. Those outer lines represent my risk tolerance for this particular project. All the things that happen that are within my risk tolerance, I don't want to know about, I don't need to know about. That's Ralph's job. He's going to manage all that kind of stuff. But what he needs to understand is, what's my comfort level? What kind of things could happen that if they do, I want him to come find me and get me involved? Not because I'm going to take it back and do it myself, but because I don't want him wasting 6 weeks going down a blind alley where if he'd just come and let me know something was happening that was outside of my risk tolerance, I could have helped him get it back under control again. So defining these boundaries right at the beginning is really important. And the way you define them is based on business conditions. Ralph, if it looks like you're going to exceed the budget by more than X% that we've agreed to, I want you back in my office immediately. Or Ralph, if it looks like you're going to negatively impact a major client, I want you back in my office immediately. So tee up where these boundaries are, so if these kind of things happen, Ralph comes and gets you back involved so you can help him get it back under control again. That's all. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The risk tolerance piece? Yeah. And last, how about some public recognition? Hey, Ralph took this project on, did a bang-up job, helped move the company forward. Zero cost to public pats on the back, but huge ROI, huge return on investment. And you know, the neat thing about delegation, none of us have to be any good or have any skills to be good at it. It's a business process. It's got 4 steps. We follow 4 steps in 6 months, it feels totally different. But the most important step of all, the first one. If you don't get the alignment, the pinpointing of exactly what the deliverable is that you're asking them to do, the rest of them don't even come into play. So why is it so hard? Seems pretty simple. What makes it hard?
You may not have the right people that you're delegating to.
Bingo. That's one reason. Do we have the will to hold people accountable when they don't do it? You know, that accountability piece is scary. How do I hold somebody accountable without chasing them off? We got a fight for talent going on today. You know, the worst thing I can ever hear from a CEO, I know that leader is a C player, but you know, a warm body's better than nobody. God, I want to throw up when I hear that. We're just going to tolerate C players because a warm body's better than not having anybody at all in the job. That's a real world issue dealing with talent today, for sure. It just means we have to be more creative and smarter about finding the talent. I learned something in this job after Gail kicked me in the butt on my second day on the job. I sat there for a couple days trying to get the lay of the land in this company. And it struck me after a couple days that my executive team, had a bunch of EVPs and SVPs, all making big 6-figure salaries. My executive team must have been on a railroad path because they were all coming through my office and they all said almost exactly the same thing when they came through my office. And it always came out in this whiny kind of voice. Jim, what do you think I should do about this or that or what? And after a couple days of listening to that, I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. I'm paying them 6-figure salaries to solve problems and bring solutions. Why in the world are they coming in my office and asking me to solve their problem? They're trying to delegate up. They're trying to put their problem on my back and have me solve it for them. And I decided I'm not going to do that. So I learned the 7 most powerful words I've ever learned as a CEO. They'd walk in, Jim, what do you think I should do about 7 words out of my mouth automatically? I don't know. What do you think? I don't know. What do you think? I absolutely am not going to give somebody an answer. What happens if somebody comes in my office and asks that whiny kind of question and I give them the solution? What are they going to do the next time? Same thing. There is no learning and growth that takes place when you give people answers. The problem is, as entrepreneurs, we know what the answer is most of the time. But you know, it's not our job to give people answers. So I just started automatically. I don't know. What do you think? 2 days of saying that in response to them whining or asking me to solve their problem, nobody ever walked in my office again looking for an answer because they knew they weren't going to get one. That's what you're making the big bucks for. That's why you get 6-figure salary. It's your job to gather data, do some analysis, come up with an ROI, bring a recommendation. You walk into my office with a recommendation, I'll listen to you all day long. But you walk in with that, hey, what should I do about it? I don't know. What do you think? I actually got into a habit, and I still use it to today. About every 6 months, I go into an office, take a blank sheet of paper, and during the day, I'll keep a hash total. How many times today did I ask my people questions divided by how many times today did I give my people answers? What's my question to answer ratio? And obviously, the more questions that I'm asking, the better it is because I'm getting them to start thinking more like an owner, like it's their money. They get more experience. I can delegate more to them. You know what the right ratio is for me, I found? 15 times more questions than answers. When I'm running at that level, boy, there's a lot of learning and growth going on. My people are starting to think more like I do. That's the whole point. I want them to think more like an owner, like it's their money, like they're invested in the company. What's your question to answer ish? I do it about every 6 months just to see where am I? Am I running at the level I need to run at?
How do you do that?
Just a hash total. Every time somebody comes in my office, whether I gave them a question or gave them an answer or asked a question, and just add them up. Real simple. Yeah.
You have their name by each one of them?
Do what?
You have their name when you're going through
Nah, I guess I could.
a general.
I'm more interested at the macro level, just see how I'm doing. Yeah. Is this making sense? This stuff? Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes there are certain things we do that we like to do that we're really good at, and it's hard to give that stuff up. You know, there are just certain things that we know we shouldn't be doing, but we love to do it. It's fun, or we enjoy it, we get job satisfaction. I used to love to analyze sales data. Boy, I could look at Excel spreadsheets and figure out the market trends and what was going on. And I always thought that was a pretty good use of my time as a CEO to analyze the data. The real question was, who put the spreadsheet together? Because I add value analyzing data. I add no value wasting my time building spreadsheets. So when something hits my inbox, my email, my voicemail, before I react to it, the first thing I ought to do is ask myself, if I do this myself, is this where I contribute the most to the company? And if you can't say yes, why are you going to do it? Who should you delegate it to? So before we just immediately react that we've got to deal with something, who should deal with it? Maybe it isn't me. Maybe that's not where I add value in the company. I had a CEO the other day in a group, I used that example of analyzing data from Excel spreadsheets. He said, that's my biggest problem, Excel spreadsheets. I said, how can it be a problem? You're the CEO of the company. He said, oh, my admin is terrible at Excel spreadsheets. So she keeps sending me spreadsheets that have all kinds of errors, and I got to go in and check the formulas and all the cells and make sure everything ticks and ties. I said, are you on drugs? What is the matter with you? Why would you do, you're the CEO of the company. Why are you going in and doing all that detailed work? He said, because she's not very good at Excel spreadsheets. I said, I know what I'd do if it was my admin. First time I got one with mistakes, I give it back to her, explain her some mistakes. She needs to find them and fix them. And by the way, I'm not accepting Excel spreadsheets that have errors anymore. Second time you send me one with errors, I'll explain. If there's a third time, there'll be somebody else sitting in your chair. I mean, you don't get a paycheck to show up and throw up at the office door. You get a paycheck to come to work, do what you're assigned to do correctly, that you will be held accountable for. And I don't think that's being mean or nasty. I think it's how you run a business. What CEO in his right mind would be editing and correcting things that his admin is sending him because they got mistakes in it? That's crazy. Talk about a valueless activity. So we just need to decide, we've got only so much precious time. Where are we going to apply it? And hopefully, most of it's on the business, not in the business. That's hard, but that's where we're the only ones with a few others that can work on the business. Lots of people can work in the business. Okay. Sometimes things we did when we started our companies made all the sense in the world then, but don't make sense at a future date. So all three of the startups I did, new billing departments make all kinds of errors. So I looked at every invoice that went out the door. But you know, a month down the road when the error ratio is 0.1%, I don't need to look at every invoice. I can just spot check once in a while. So it's not like I'm going to throw out processes or things that add value, but I'm going to constantly challenge myself. Do I still need the same depth, the same frequency today that I did 4 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago? So don't get hung up following a certain depth or frequency. Constantly challenge yourself. Do I still need the same depth, the same frequency I did back 4 weeks ago? And third, I run into situations, and they're real, where something is so mission critical to a company, maybe you shouldn't delegate it. Maybe it's that important, it has that much impact on the success or profitability of the company, maybe you shouldn't delegate it. I was in Napa, California not too long ago, and one of the members has a land development company. So they buy these huge parcels of really expensive California land with kind of a 10-year horizon to develop the property and build things on it. And the CEO said, you know, I've been trying to delegate the final review of the bids that we submit on these land opportunities. But if we make a mistake in the price or terms and conditions in our bid and we get the award, it could put the company out of business 5 years down the road. He said, I've never felt comfortable delegating that to anybody else. I said, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe that's one you better hang on to if it's got that kind of impact on your company. But then what he needs to ask himself, what's he going to stop doing that gives him time to do that review? And we are notoriously terrible at stop doing lists. We just keep piling on. Whatever I did yesterday, I'll do more today and more tomorrow. I don't know about you guys, but when I hit 27-hour days, I lose a little productivity. I mean, this is a marathon we are in, not a 100-yard dash. You cannot be running companies with heroic efforts in 27-hour days. It isn't sustainable. What's on your stop doing list? On all 3 of the public companies I led, every 6 months we asked every employee, what's on your stop doing list? What's that stupid report you spend a day creating for somebody that hasn't looked at it in 2 years? If you killed it tomorrow, nobody'd even miss it. And if you really needed it, you could always put it back again. We spend so much time on the to-do list side, which is important. Nobody ever spends time on the stop doing side. People say, I don't have enough time to do my job. You have more than enough time. Just stop doing all the dumb things that don't make sense anymore and err on the side of challenging the thing that we've always done it that way, so I'm going to stop it. What's on your stop doing list? I was about here in this presentation in Minneapolis recently, and right about now, one of the members piped up, I disagree with everything you said. So that's okay, it's just my opinion. I didn't say it was right. He said, I have a $300 million company and I sign all the outgoing checks. Wait a minute. You don't really mean you sign all the outgoing checks. You sign the ones over a certain size, right? He said, no. I sign all the outgoing checks. I said, wait a minute. In a $300 million company, you sign a $12.50 Office Depot check? He said, yeah, I do. I said, how come you don't have a CFO in a $300 million company? He said, I do have a CFO. Okay, how come you have a CFO apparently has no authority in a $300 million company? He said, oh, he's got a lot of authority. I just won't let him sign the outgoing checks. I give up. You win. I don't know. Why in the world in a $300 million company with a CFO do you think you have to sign the outgoing checks? He said, it's how I've monitored my cash flow since I started the company, watching the payables outflow. I did something like that in all 3 startups I did, but not for a long period of time. I said, well, how long ago has it been since you started your company? 18 years. You think it might be time to question whether that's still the best use of your time? You don't think your own employees are going crazy every day because vendors won't deliver products and services because of this monster stack of unsigned checks on your desk? I left after lunch. The chair called me late that afternoon, said, Jim, after lunch, his group decided to make him an issue and processed him. And he's now agreed to delegate signing checks below a certain size. Well, hallelujah, right? It made all the sense in the world in startup mode, but in 18 years, the guy never stepped back and challenged himself. Do I still need to be the one signing all the outgoing checks? That's all. You know, it's what's right for each one of us in our company, depending on where we are from a evolution standpoint. There's no right or wrong. It's what's right for us in our companies, that's all. But talk about finding ways to delegate stuff so that we can spend more time on the business rather than in the business. I've sort of come to the conclusion that as a CEO, there are 4 things I can never delegate to anybody else that I have to own. If I'm not driving these 4, nobody's driving these 4. So it's kind of my little mini job description. Number 1, set direction for the company. That's me. I can't delegate that to anybody else. So set direction for the company. Number 2, make sure we've got the right people on board and develop them. Now, I'm not going to do that day to day, but I'm going to make sure we have the right people and the right processes in place so we're only hiring the right talent. And when we get that talent, we're going to develop that talent. Number 3, make sure all my people have resources to do their job. And number 4, get big obstacles out of people's way. That's kind of my big 4. Set direction, people, resources, obstacles. If I'm not driving those 4 in my company, nobody's driving those 4. So I can't delegate those 4. And anything that takes me away from those 4 or dilutes my effort in those 4 means that I'm not spending the time on the business that I need to. Each of us maybe has different job description, but that's mine, okay? The other thing this delegation stuff can help with is getting you some picture of the kind of people you have in your company and on your team. How people react to delegation can be very insightful in terms of, do I have A players, B players, or C players? Because as I said before, A players demand accountability. If you don't have set goals for an A player, they'll set goals for themselves and hold themselves accountable. C players will duck and dodge accountability all day long. They may even refuse or try to not take on something you want to delegate to them. So how people react to that can be pretty insightful. It's sort of like job descriptions. You give a job description to an A player, they could care less what it says. If they see something that's not getting done, they'll go do it. It's the right thing for the company. Who are the only people in the world that would ever look you in the eye and say, Jim, that's not in my job description? C players. So how people react to trying to delegate things to them and holding them accountable can be pretty insightful in terms of, what do I have here, an A player or a C player? You know the ABC player methodology, right? Brad Smart wrote the book, Top Grading, where we differentiate our people into A's, B's, and C's. Okay, good. Is this delegation thing making any sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Jim, here are a couple of examples around the table of kind of how they reacted to that, how they were delegating, how they disagree with these principles.
Or perhaps one thing you're doing today, you might delegate to somebody else. Anybody got one that they'd share with the group?
I'm getting ready to delegate everything I do. So, it's hard.
It is hard.
I started a company, like 37 years ago, so trying to get that, do that, it's hard. It's probably one of the hardest things I've done.
Absolutely. Is it because of the people
They're
or?
asking me to keep some things, which I'm not sure that's
Ah.
even smart to do that,
Huh.
which is product development, is the main one they're asking me to. But if I keep doing it, then someday I might be able to do it, and
Right.
it's hard.
It is hard.
I haven't signed any checks in years.
That's encouraging. What else? What else makes it so tough? What experiences have you had?
Well, I came up through sales and always enjoyed it. Ultimately got into sales management. When I started running this company, I knew I could add value in sales. So when we were on the wholesale side, we would only close 5 to 7 deals a year, so I can get involved in them. But in retail, we close one a day.
Wow.
Just be a bottleneck. And it's actually more fun, more appealing to me, but I just got no place to.
Mm.
And it's been a struggle, but I've actually learned more about the craft watching these guys do it
Yeah.
than being involved in it.
Huh. Cool.
And it seems to be working.
So you picked your shot.
Yeah, but it was hard. It was really hard. And I struggled. Whenever they get a big account, I can tell they keep the door shut. But it is the always sticking my nose in it. And partly because my style's different. And salespeople can be totally different, equally successful, but they're successful doing it their own way.
Yeah.
And when I try to, do some of the things that I do, they just may not be able to pull it off in that environment. And I can't pull off the way they do it. And it ends up diluting their effectiveness. So I've learned to stay out of it.
I was always afraid, since I was the boss, I could pretty much make any decision, waive any other thing, and that, I'd violate rules without even thinking about it, just because I was trying to make a customer happy, right?
Right, I can end up closing a deal by compromising on an objection. They have to sell through.
Right.
And therefore not compromise. And
Right.
so it actually is to the detriment if I actually am in there. Yeah, I can close it quicker, but usually less profitable.
Yep. Good example. Anybody else? Please.
I've got to stop running the meetings. It's the small business entrepreneurial attitude that I'm not the one saying it, no one's going to say it. And when I sit down and shut up and let some other people say it, the accountability happens in the right way. And the leadership and beliefs and faith is built in the right way. And I still step in there when I should.
I wrote a column for Entrepreneur Magazine for a couple of years, and the column that got more play than any other one, people went crazy, and it was titled, CEOs Should Never Facilitate Leadership Team Meetings. And people went, I got nailed from every part of the globe about, how could that be? It's our leadership team. Why not? I said, because CEOs have a more important role in a leadership team meeting. The most important role for us is mining for conflict. Watching body language, watching how people react, who's holding back, who's got something they clearly want to put on the table, but they're hesitant to do so. You can't be a facilitator and also be a content participant in the same meeting. I can't do it myself. So the more important role is not facilitation. You can find ways to do that. The most important role is us sitting back and being the orchestra leader. We're watching all the instrument players and who's playing and who's not playing and who do I pull out, who do I call on? So the question then always is, well, who should facilitate a leadership team meeting? 3 options. You hire somebody from outside, but that'll cost you money over a period of time. Or 2, you rotate it among your leadership team, but that means one of them is out of the game each day. The third option, we've got a bunch, probably 90% of our clients. Good morning. The third option, and who ought to facilitate leadership team meetings, we probably have about 90% of our clients doing this one. Pick somebody who's a high potential junior leader, but isn't on the senior leadership team, and assuming they understand the confidentiality aspect, send them off to some professional facilitation training and make part of their leadership development program to facilitate the senior leadership team meetings. What a great opportunity for a junior leader. They get to listen to strategic discussion, they get to participate. Again, they need to understand confidentiality. If they ever violate that, they're history. But what a great leadership development opportunity for a junior leader for a couple of years to facilitate. And then what you find out, if you send them off to some professional training so they're very good at facilitation, other people in your company will start to have them come in and facilitate their meetings as well. So we probably 90% of our clients that we work with have trained somebody, and there's actually a couple resources that do training for senior leadership facilitation. Okay. Anybody else on this delegation stuff before we move on? Please.
Yeah, I think the separation, when you start to learn to delegate, as soon as you have that person that fails to do what you did the right way, then you get even more hesitant to do that. And it's all about knowing your people, what their strengths are, and all that. But it's hard to do that. You got to know who to delegate that to, right? So,
You bet.
I think having a facilitator is really important because they'll say things to that person that they wouldn't say to the president or CEO. You know what I'm saying? They actually speak to the CEO through that person as opposed to.
And it's one of the reasons we insist with our clients, if they're going to do that, they've got to send that individual off to professional facilitation training because they're going to be in with the heavyweights. They're going to be in with the senior leadership team and the boss, and they've got to be able to talk to them in a respectful but firm way. And sometimes, I mean, they're exposed if they haven't been trained properly to be a facilitator. Yep.
When you've asked the question, what are the barriers to delegating, has anybody ever used the word trust?
Yep.
But not in the sense of, I don't trust this person, but someone's ability to trust and confidence. You know, I have a very relational operations manager who's just really into that. And I've watched him trust an incompetent person and maybe miss the whole fact that it's not something he should have delegated that to. And that comes up.
Yeah, and I think it goes back, if you, how many of you read 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Pat Lencioni's book? You know, I was Pat's first affiliate and his only affiliate for about 5 years. The bottom level of his pyramid is trust. It's vulnerability-based trust, and I think that's really what it gets to. It's the difference between people who extend trust until proven wrong versus people who, you got to earn my trust. I'm an extend trust kind of person. I always have been in my career. And I'll extend trust within limits to almost anybody until you prove me wrong. You prove me wrong, we're going to have a different relationship. But the person that's doing this, you know, you have to earn my trust. Boy, it is hard to create a trusting environment where people are sitting back saying, you got to earn my trust. I'm not going to extend trust to anybody. It's a tough issue. I had a woman, I was doing a 2-day strat planning meeting not too long ago, and on day 1, there was a woman in charge of marketing, and every time she opened her mouth, the rest of the team stopped talking for the next 20 minutes. So there was something going on between her and the rest of the leadership team. I didn't know what it was. We went out to dinner that night, and after a little bit too much wine, the great elixir of truth, however, this woman volunteered out of the blue. She said, I've been married for 10 years, and I just started trusting my husband. So if you think I'm going to trust any of you guys on this team, you're crazy. Almost had a heart attack. What am I going to do with this, right? I grabbed the CEO. I said, what are you going to do? She had to go. I mean, how would you ever create a trusting environment when she'd already gone on record that she wasn't going to trust anybody?
I've got a question for Darrell.
Sure.
Is it that they trusted them to do something that they weren't competent in doing?
Yes.
All right, so what that gets at is what's trustworthiness.
Hmm.
So for instance, is that you, Warren Averett is trustworthy in doing tax returns, but you would not hire them to come and paint your home. See, there's the idea of what you're asking them to do. Are they trustworthy at doing what you want them to do? So it's I think as delegators, what we have to think of is that if you're delegating somebody to something to somebody, is to look at, is this in their set of competencies?
Mm.
And that's, I think in this particular case, they may be, that person, you may be able to delegate something else to them that is in their competencies. And so their trustworthiness is pretty high in that competency, but not in the other.
Wow. Good point. Thank you. In the package of information that I've already sent Frank that he's going to send to you, there's a little 3-page PDF article I wrote called Delegation that summarizes this whole conversation we've just had. You can email it, you can print it, you can drop it on people's chairs early in the morning before they come to work as a reminder to your staff about delegation if you choose. So it'll be in the packet of information you get from Frank with all the other stuff, okay? All right. Let's talk about the second barrier to growth, and then we'll take a break. Startup mode for old Ralph, he gets an office with all the accoutrements, desk, chairs, fax, telephone, whatever he needs to get started. And it typically gets him up to about that first brick wall. And typically about that first brick wall, one day in walks Ralph's friendly CPA, who looks him in the eye and says, Ralph, I'm getting really tired of coming in here and trying to audit your financials with all these handwritten Post-it notes and boxes of receipts. You people got to get organized here. You need a chart of accounts and an accounting system, Peachtree, QuickBooks, something that gets you started, some rudimentary system. And that's the beginning of a whole new phase for Ralph's company we call functional system evolution. Typically, the accounting system is the first, but now all of a sudden, new systems start to proliferate that do different things, better, faster, cheaper, more efficiently in different functional areas of the company. Very typical. The problem is all those technology systems come from different vendors and they don't talk to each other. So you end up with this marvelous proliferation of really good stuff, good systems, but you got the same data in multiple systems, and many times it's hard to get a real-time picture of the company at the 40,000-foot level without cutting and pasting and trying to pull data from all these different systems. Totally normal, nothing particularly wrong with that. And it typically gets companies kind of up to about this size range. And typically about this size range, one day in walks your friendly IT sales guy who has the solution for you. What you need is an integrated system, one of those ERPs that can run your entire company seamlessly and transparently on one platform with perfect information at the drop of a hat. Yeah, how many of you have done the ERP implementation thing? How many of you finished ahead of schedule and under budget? Nobody's ever done it in the history. Did you?
No,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I mean, I mean, this is probably the you bet the company phase on this slide, and of all of the slides, because the world is littered with people who started into a big ERP project and never came out the other end. I mean, even big companies, forget about entrepreneurs, how about big companies? There was $1.5 billion pharmaceutical distributor in Dallas, Texas, put in an ERP system. Halfway in, they lost all their data. Didn't misplace it, they lost it, could not recover. For 45 days, they shipped nothing, they invoiced nothing, and they received nothing. And on the 60th day, they declared Chapter 7 liquidation. Can you imagine $1.5 billion company, gonzo in 45 days? Hershey Candy Company missed Halloween one year. It's the biggest candy season of the entire year. They missed it because they were in the middle of an ERP and couldn't pull the trigger and missed the entire season. I'm a huge fan of integrated systems, but I want all the ammunition on my side of the table. This is a project that CEOs can never delegate to anybody else. It's too big. It's got too many ramifications if it goes north or south. We have got to be the leaders, the cheerleaders, the overseers. We cannot delegate this to anybody else. And number two, we got to stop thinking that it's a technology project, because it isn't. Technology is easy. You can write the system code and make it do anything you want it to do. The thing that makes it so darn difficult and complex is change management for our people. We're changing the way they take care of customers, the way they interface with each other. You've probably all seen the change management curve, right? The predictable emotions all of our employees go through. Anytime we change anything large scale, change the health benefit plan, put in a new sales comp program, do an ERP. It's change management. That's what makes it so tough. First reaction when you announce the project, shock and surprise. And why is management doing this? I thought everything was hunky-dory. You know, my job's okay. Why do we have to go through all this change that management just announced? Second emotion, denial. This isn't really going to happen. This is another one of those management fad things that they always give up on. This too shall pass. If we can just wait out management, they'll give up on the project and we actually won't have to go through it at all. Third emotion, when they realize you're serious, now they're just pissed. They're screwing with us. I've been here 16 years doing my job on the same system. Now I got to go learn a new one. I might not be able to do it. I might get fired. I'm madder than heck that I got to go through this nonsense at this point in my career. Fourth emotion, by some of your best people, they'll try to cut a special deal for themselves. I know why everybody else ought to be on the new system, but my function's unique, so I can do it the old way, right? You know, good try there, Billy Bob, but you need to convert like everybody else does. This is known as the Valley of Despair because it is 100% depression. The train has left the station, it's going 100 miles an hour, I have no idea where it's going, don't know how it's going to get there, don't know if I can do my job, I might get fired. This is Chicken Little and the sky is falling for our people. I mean, it is real misery. They're scared to death. Coming out of that, maybe they can take another look. Hey, I hear some of my coworkers are on that new system. I'm hearing it's not so bad. Maybe I should take another look. And then maybe they'll try it, and then ultimately where we have to get the whole company, hey, commitment, that new system is okay. I can work with that. That new health benefit plan, it's fair. Every one of our employees goes through every one of those emotions, some faster than others. And guess what? All our leaders go through exactly the same emotions. We're not exempt just because we're leaders or our executive team are leaders. And our job is twofold as senior leaders. Number one, help our best people get through the valley of despair. A lot of one-on-one jaw-boning time. What's in it for our customers? What's in it for our company? What's in it for you as an employee? So help our best people really understand it and get through the valley of despair. And our second job, it's kind of distasteful, carefully watch the people who get stuck in denial and anger. Because after a respectful amount of time, we need to look those people in the eye and say, you either get on board or get off the bus. Because as long as you have people stuck in denial and anger, you will never get the entire company to commitment. And even though it's so tough to remove a couple, the first couple you may have to exit, the rest of the population figures out pretty quick. That's not such a good place to be stuck. It actually loosens things up and helps more people start moving through the valley of despair. I contend that's what makes these projects so high risk and high cost. It isn't the technology per se, it's the change management that we're putting our people through. And the worst of all things we see routinely is CEOs who oversell the benefits of one of these projects. This is the greatest thing since sliced bread. This will fix every problem known to man for the last 25 years and expected for the next 25. No, it isn't. And every employee knows you're lying to them. You know, sell the reality. The reality is we got some hard work to do. There are benefits at the end, and let me describe where they're going to come, but we're going to be together doing some pretty hard work here. And there'll be days when you're angry and days when you're in denial, and that's normal, that's human nature. All I can tell you is together we're going to go through this and end up with a better system. That's what we need to talk to people. We need to get buy-in at the beginning from influential users, but then we can't lie to them about the pie in the sky kind of vision of what it's going to look like. Okay? Now, remember I said at the beginning that revenue was not a good predictor of where those brick walls occur. Headcount was a better predictor. Here's why. An arithmetic increase in people, locations, databases is an exponential increase in the complexity of running an organization. And we almost always underestimate that increase in complexity. You know, I hear from entrepreneurial CEOs all the time, hey, we just bought this little company, it has only 30 more employees, no big deal. Are you kidding me? 30 new employees? How did you validate that they all share your company's core values? How do they fit from a chemistry? All the things you ought to be asking. And in many cases, nobody's ever even asked those questions. What's the number one reason mergers and acquisitions fail? Culture and the chemistry and all those pieces fitting together. And I meet a lot of companies that do a lot of M&A work. First thing I ask, can I see your due diligence checklist? And I'm praying that there's some line item on there that says assess culture. I don't find that more than about 15% of the time, but it's the number one, the biggest cause of failure in a transaction, and you're not even going to spend any time trying to figure out how do I match the different cultures and core values and assimilate the two organizations. That's a big deal. You know the Container Store? Do you have the Container Store here in Birmingham? All the little household goods containers? About a $900 million company headquartered in Dallas. They've got every kind of container you could imagine, every kind of material and shape for the kitchens and bathrooms and basements and garages. Really a neat little company. They've done something really interesting along this lines. I mean, they're growing their business. They're opening new stores, retail stores in new markets all the time. So they're dealing with this every day of the week. How do we assess culture? How do we make sure we hire the right people? How do we make sure our processes fit? The three owners did something kind of interesting when they started that company. They made a commitment to each other that we will never hire anything but A-player retail clerks. So the top 10 to 15% of all retail clerks in the world, we will only hire A-player retail clerks. Now, I don't know about you guys, it's been a long time since I ran into an A-player retail clerk. I think I'm a magnet for C-player retail clerks. They come out of the woodwork when I enter a store, I think. But there are A-player retail clerks out there, and that was their commitment. We're only going to hire A-players. Now, to find an A-player retail clerk that you're going to hire, it's a much longer, deeper interview process. They actually use the top grading interview that Brad Smart wrote about in his book by that same name, Top Grading, in 1997. So it's a much longer, deeper interview process, so they spend a lot more than most of us spend on interviewing. Now they find this A-player candidate. To get them on the payroll costs 50 to 100% more than what you pay a C-player retail clerk. Because these are the creme de la creme, the top people, premium wages, so they spend a ton of money on base salaries. Now that individual reports for duty in their store. The first week on the job, every new retail clerk that they hire gets shipped to Dallas, Texas headquarters for 1 week that's called Foundation Week. And their entire first week on the job is all about culture, core values, purpose, mission, customer relationships, legendary stories. So it is a real deep dive, and they spend it figuring that you're coming to work for us for a career, not just a paycheck. So you need to know all the history and the legendary stories and all the other things that take place here. So they spend a ton of money sending all these people to Dallas for their first week. And now that clerk gets back to their store, the first year on the job, every new retail clerk undergoes a minimum of 270 hours of training in a year. Can you imagine that? The average retail clerk in the United States in their first year gets 7 hours of training. So they overspend on interviewing, they overspend on base salary, they overspend on Foundation Week in Dallas, they overspend on their first year training, but you know what they've learned? 1 A-player retail clerk replaces 3 C-player retail clerks. So even after spending all that money, there's a phenomenal positive ROI on that investment. And what's turnover? People turnover in the retail segment, like 150% maybe? Anybody in retail? Is it pretty high? I mean, people turnover up pretty high?
It's not 150%.
Whatever it is. Their turnover?
We're converting to this A manager right now. So we've got a 100% turnover
Okay.
to top guys because we're putting in A guys.
Got it. Good move. So their turnover is under 25% nationally. Unheard of in a retail business. I mean, that's pretty low for a retail business. And now when they open a new store in a new marketplace, 94% plus success rate. I mean, they don't have a lot of store failures. So it's not like they've stopped growing the business and expanding, but they have a process to do it that's rational and is based on the A players. And the other thing they do that I think is really cool, they have the best recruiting system I've ever heard of. Every one of their retail clerks has a little business card stack in their pocket. And after they've talked to a customer and done a transaction, and if they're impressed that the customer really gets it about containers and seems to be passionate about figuring that stuff out, at the end of the transaction, they can hand that little card to the customer and it says, you ought to think about applying for a job here. So their own people are vetting new candidates to join the sales organization based on looking for people who look like themselves. Talk about what a really cool way to recruit, and talk about no cost doing it. They're meeting the people while they're in the transaction, so they get to really see how they act and what they know. Okay. So the point is on this, it isn't revenue that gets us tripped up or gets us stuck typically as entrepreneurs. It's the complexity of the business. And that's why I said headcount is a great measure of complexity. More people, more complexity. Please.
Well, one of the things that's rolling around in my head, you know, and this is kind of confirming it, is can you really rehabilitate a C player? Okay, and you know, or you know, because if they're putting that much into finding the A, to me that says you just got to move on. You got to move on.
Okay, so number one, you can't fix all the C players in the world, nor should you spend your time trying to do it. There's a much better ROI for people at our level to help a B player become an A player than trying to fix all the C players in the world. And about the only way to fix a C player is move them into a smaller, less complex job where maybe once again they could be a B minus player. The problem is when you do that, and my history is packed with these, when you demote somebody into a smaller, less complex job, their ego gets in the way so much of the time.
They never see it.
So my track record is really crappy about rehabilitating C players and saving them. You know, I move them down and then they're gone. They got their resume going, they're looking for another job. About the only time I've ever been able to do that is if somebody is in such stress and it's affecting their marriage or their relationship with their kids, and they actually thank you because you've moved them into a less complex, less stressful job. But other than that, my track record sucks. So and even if you could do it, the reality is there's a better ROI helping a B become an A than trying to fix all the C players in the world. Okay. Let's take a break. All right, barrier to growth number 3. Business focus. So the fundamental things companies have to focus on that change the larger and more complex an organization gets. So as we all know, startup mode, it's all about revenue. Go get the next customer. This is typically where the 3 great sales lies apply. You all know the 3 sales lies, right? Every customer is a good customer. That's a lie. Every order is a good order. That's a lie. And all gross margin dollars are equal. That's a lie. But down here, Ralph is just ecstatic to get revenue from anybody. There's very little discrimination about good customers, bad customers, good revenue. It all looks good. And it gets up to about that first brick wall. And remember I said at that first brick wall, somebody better emerge who can look at the business, not where it is at that first wall, but how do we get to the second one? Look what's going on between the first 2 brick walls. Companies going from 10 to maybe 50 to 75 people, that is really expensive growth. All those people. That's also where all those functional systems are starting to proliferate. Hardware, software, training, really expensive. That's why we say somebody better emerge at that first brick wall who can not only oversee the revenue cycle, or at least watch out for it, but also the cash flow cycle. How do we get and keep revenue and cash flow in balance? Because we know that bad things happen when they get out of balance. Okay? Doesn't have to be us that does that, but somebody in our team has to be good at managing and balancing the revenue cycle and the cash flow cycle. Assuming that happens, we get those under control, and the team, Ralph and his team, get over the second brick wall. Now, in addition to the revenue cycle, the cash flow cycle, now it's the quality of business. Are we making money selling all of our products and services to all of our customers? And that's a really profound question. When I find companies that are asking that question and managing products and services at the gross margin line, I'm always happy. When I find companies that are managing at the contribution margin line, then I'm ecstatic, because that's where the real insight comes. So let me give you an example. When I took over this chemical business, it was a turnaround. So everything was bad, cash flow, profit, the whole 9 yards. So I got my team together and I said, guys, we've got to turn this $1.5 billion company around. They all looked at me and said, don't worry about it. You don't know the chemical industry. This is a cyclical industry. For 70 years, we've gone through peaks and valleys. For 70 years, it's always gotten better. So don't worry, Alampi, it'll get better. I thought, wow, what a turnaround strategy that is. Sit on my butt and wait for the cycle to kick in and everything magically will just happen. But I wasn't sure the shareholders were going to be quite that patient. So I asked my CFO, I said, go back and run me a 25-year history of the gross margin percent at the company level. Let's see how cyclical that is in explaining our problem. Oh, it's pretty cyclical. No, I mean, we had a 25-year trend of declining gross margins, so don't even talk to me about cyclicality. We got a different problem. We got offshore competitors and commoditization, new products. So this was the shape of the gross margin curve. And then I asked my CFO, what's the operating expense percent done during the same 25 years? You guys could all draw that one. Now, being somewhat astute, it struck me that the day that those two lines touched one another, it was going to be really ugly around there. And that's when they start whacking CEOs, and I was a CEO, and I didn't want to get whacked. So my second stupid question to my team was, do we really make money selling to all of our customers? Oh, well, Alampi, you must be a total idiot. Why would you ask us whether we're making money? Why would we sell to somebody and not make money? We have a positive gross margin percent for every customer. I said, well, thank you very much, but I could care less. Tell me about the contribution margin. Here's the gross margin percent. After that, there's a whole bunch of things we've got to do to deliver products and all the other stuff to manage the business to get down to a net at the bottom line, it's a quasi-contribution margin. Are we still making money net at our customers' bottom line? Dead silence. They didn't even understand the question. So we identified in that business 18 different costs to serve that came after somebody gave us a piece of business. Sales rep time per account, receivable days, inventory set aside, special handling, labeling, barcoding, 18 different things that ate up our resources as we tried to fulfill business that people gave us. We built a computer model that could measure all 18 of those costs to serve at the customer ship-to level. So for every one of our customers, we had 75,000 ship-tos in the US. But for every one of those, we could actually calculate a bottom line based on which of our resources they were using as a customer of ours. We built the model, we ran it against all 75,000 ship-tos, calculated a bottom line for each one of those customers, then we ranked them from highest to lowest contribution margin, and then we added up the numbers. Most fascinating graph I'd ever seen back then. Left-hand axis was company net income, and the bottom axis was cumulative percent of our customers. So 100% represented all 75,000 ship-tos ranked from highest contribution margin to lowest, okay? Still with me? Okay. What we found was kind of interesting. By the time we got to the first or top 85% of our customers, we'd achieved 120% of the company's bottom line. Now, one does not have to be a CPA to realize you can't have 120% of the bottom line, and most you can have is 100. And that's because the bottom 15% of our customers, when we factored in what it was costing us to fulfill that business, the best case when we sold to them, we made nothing. The best case. The worst case, we lost money on every transaction. So here we are, $1.5 billion public company, and 15% of our customers are unprofitable when you factor in what it's costing us to do business with them. That was terrible. I mean, I was horrified. We've been doing this now for 18 years with our clients. It is not unusual to find an entrepreneurial company where this unprofitable segment might be as much as 30 to 35% of a company's customers. That's a disaster. 35% of your customers are unprofitable when you factor in all the costs to serve. First reaction by my team, let's go fire the bottom 15% of our customers because their bottom line will go up 20%.
Is that the first reaction though?
Yes, it was.
Really?
Unsophisticated.
You don't hear excuses or I gotta keep this customer because.
Oh, that came later, but
Okay.
yeah, but the first reaction was, let's just fire him, and then automatically it'll result in a 20% increase. I said, hold it, buckaroos, there's a little fixed cost in this business, right? We got warehouses and tank farms and trucks, and all that doesn't go away just because we fire the bottom 15% of our customers. And then our marketing guy was pretty bright. He said, you know, we're already doing business with those customers, so we've already spent the money to acquire them. Isn't there a way to just change the way we're doing business with them? Just get them to zero. We don't have to make a penny of profit if we just stop losing money. That'd be a huge win from a company standpoint. So we created a one-page computer report for each of those customers that showed exactly which of the 18 costs to serve made them unprofitable for us. We trained our entire sales organization and required them go meet with every one of those customers, lay the report on the guy's desk and say to him, our company's losing money doing business with your company. How together can we change that? So we didn't blame the customer. We said, together, how can we change that? The thing that was really depressing to me, 70% of the time, this had nothing to do with the customer. It was us. We were too stupid to know the dumb things we did, gave away, never charged for. We were a wholesale distributor, right? We had a customer in here in this group. He bought 100 chemicals a week from us. He put each line item on a separate purchase order. So 100 products, 100 purchase orders. Well, I want all 100 products on one purchase order so I could batch process them. Guy said, I could do that tomorrow. Nobody ever told me it was a problem for you. 15 years doing business with a guy losing money on every transaction because we're too stupid about our own business to realize the implications. And if we couldn't mutually change the way we did business with these people, the court of last resort, obscene price increase. And I mean really obscene, 60, 70%, hoping they'd go away and be a problem for my competition. Do you know 50% of them stayed anyway after an obscene price increase? Why didn't we do that 5 years ago? So I'm happy when I find companies that manage to the gross margin line, product and service gross margin. When I find companies taking it down to a quasi-contribution margin, that's where the real action is. That's where the real opportunity is. Now, if you hired Deloitte Consulting to do this kind of work, it'd be called activity-based costing. That is not what I'm talking about because that's way too much overhead for entrepreneurs. This is Alampi's relative model. So example, sales rep time per account. I really didn't care that somebody spent 3.8547 hours per month, a sales rep, in an account. We said you spend 0 to 10 hours a month, 10 to 20, or more than 20. So we put things in buckets because I wasn't looking for precision. I just wanted to identify some bottom feeders that we could go take some action to improve the profitability by doing something at the individual customer ship to level. So this is not ABC, this is a relative model, and it's not precision that we're aiming for. I've got a copy of the one-page report we built that showed on all 18 costs to serve what made an individual ship to unprofitable. I've already sent it to Frank. If that's of interest to you and it's not clear, call me, email me. I will not charge you a nickel. Happy to chat with anybody about how we went after this stuff. But talk about getting after real profitability, that was it. And we get our clients to do exactly that. Gross margin is good, contribution margin is better. Comments? Does that make sense? Okay. Say again?
I've done that, but I don't know about a 60% pricing, because I've done a 16% pricing.
No, I wanted them to go away. I was trying to force them out, and they were dumb enough to stay. If I'm going to do business with them, at least I'm going to make a lot of money, right? Yeah, yeah. All right. The good news is there are some simple practical things that'll help avoid getting stuck at those brick walls. Called the Rockefeller Habits. Came out of J.D. Rockefeller's biography, a book called Titan by Ron Chernow. These are really sophisticated concepts. You got to set priorities, you're going to meet once in a while, and you need some metrics. That's about as sophisticated as I'm going to get, which isn't very sophisticated. So let me spend just a second on each one. I would bet that everybody in here keeps track of your own priorities, probably maybe a smartphone, maybe an Outlook, maybe just a paper and pencil to-do list. In fact, I don't think I've ever met a senior leader of a company who didn't have a way to track their own personal priorities. But you know what I find all the time? Every member of a leadership team could hit their priorities. It doesn't mean the company hits its priorities because they're not linked. And that's the secret of priorities. They have got to start at the company level, not the leader level, the company level. What are the 3 to 5? No more than 5, because if everything's important, nothing's important. What are the 3 to 5 highest priorities for our company in 3 years, in 1 year, and the most important time period of all for great execution in the next 90 days? And once we know what they are, the top 3 to 5 at the company level, then we ought to move down to the department level. Hey, in the finance department, what are your top 3 to 5 for the next 90 days that support the company's top 3 to 5 goals? And once we've defined them at the department level, then we ought to take it down to the individual employee level. Hey, Ralph, what are you going to be working on in the next 90 days that support your department's top 3 to 5, that support the company's top 3 to 5? So ultimately, every single employee has a piece of the action. Every employee has a couple things they've committed to work on that aligns them with the rest of the organization so that I get the entire organization moving to some degree in the same direction. I don't ever expect all my employees to be able to recite the strategic plan back to me because that's not going to happen. But when we tell our employees every 90 days, hey folks, here are the 3 to 5 highest priorities for our company in the next 90 days, I want every single employee to ask themselves, what could I do in my job to support that? That's all. If I could get that to happen, that'd be huge in terms of most organizations in getting that kind of alignment. So it isn't about the whole strategic plan. It's each employee knowing, well, hey, there's 2 things I could do as a warehouseman, as a driver, as a customer service rep. And the reason we think telling our people every 90 days what's important at the company level, if you don't tell an A player what to work on, what's important, they'll figure it out. They will intuitively know where to spend their time. The problem are the C players. You don't tell them what to work on, they're off in la-la land working on stuff that has nothing to do with what's most important for the company. That's why every 90 days we're going to tell people, hey folks, here are the 3 to 5 highest priorities for our company. That's priorities. No more rocket science than that. Questions? Comments? Make sense? Okay. Meeting rhythm, number 2 Rockefeller habit. How many of you read Pat Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team? Great. So I was Pat's first affiliate. The book he wrote after that one is called Death by Meeting. Anybody read that? Yeah, it's a great book. It's all about why meetings are so bad that nobody ever wants to be in more meetings. 3 reasons why leadership team meetings are so bad. Number 1, the agendas are wrong. Great leadership teams never mix tactical and strategic topics in the same meeting because our brains don't work like that. If we're doing hands-on root cause analysis, problem solving, real tactical stuff, and then we try to jump out here and do blue sky, creative, out-of-the-box thinking, and then back to tactical, our brains are not very good at segueing back and forth. Great leadership teams declare today's meeting is either strategic topics or tactical. We're not going to mix the 2. So number 1, it's an agenda problem. Number 2, it's a discipline problem. I know none of you have ever been in a 1-hour management meeting and 2.5 hours later you're still in the same meeting, bouncing off the walls, off on tangents, and nobody wants to stop the stupid meeting. We're all sitting there waiting for the boss to call timeout and stop the meeting. I personally believe every member of a senior leadership team has an obligation to call timeout and ask the question, are we getting done today what we expected? It shouldn't just be the CEO that can stop a meeting. Anybody ought to be able to at least raise the question. That's part of the obligation of being a senior leader. And if we're not getting done what we expected, then disband the damn meeting. Let's reschedule. Let's do something different. We let meetings take over our lives, and that's nuts. We run meetings. They don't run us. So those meetings, those 2.5-hour meetings that were supposed to be a 30-minute or a 1 hour, stop. At least raise the question, are we getting done what we expected today? And 3rd reason leadership team meetings are so bad, this whole meeting rhythm, more than occasionally I'll have a leader or a senior leader or executive say to me, I think meetings are a total waste of time for somebody at my level. I contribute more to my company when I'm in my office working on my inbox and my emails and my voicemails. And every time I hear that from a leader, I say the same thing. Very respectfully, you're probably not cut out to be a leader. Because unfortunately, the real world is for us, the most important work senior leaders do, working together in meetings on the business. If we're not doing that, who is? Is there some third-party group over here I don't know about that's working on vision and execution? No, it's job one for the leadership team. If we aren't spending time together working on the business, nobody is. Nobody is. It's a necessary evil of running a company. So the trouble is you don't get good meeting as a team if you don't do it regularly. It can't be sporadic or once in a while. It's got to be regular. So this is what we implement with all the companies we work with. The top 2 meetings above the line are strategic meetings. The bottom 3 are tactical meetings. So we think it all starts with a 2-day strategic planning meeting, once a year, off-site, all strategic. What are we trying to do and how are we going to get it done? At a minimum, out of that 2-day strat plan meeting will come some 3-year goals, some 1-year goals, and most important of all, some 90-day Q1 goals. And those Q1 goals tee up the second strategic meeting, the quarterly executive team meeting. Whole day, the entire senior leadership team, and we'll do 3 things. We'll look back at the quarter we just finished and do a real serious post-mortem and hold ourselves accountable. Did we get our top 3 to 5 priorities for Q1 done in the last 90 days? The second thing we'll do at that quarterly, we'll look back at our 1-year goals and we'll validate that all of our 1-year initiatives that are on the list from the strat plan are still necessary and critical by the end of the year. So we'll confirm that everything on that list still has to be done by the end of the year. And then we'll set the top 3 to 5 priorities for Q2. And we'll go through that same routine every quarter. Look back in postmortem, validate our 1-year goals, look forward, top 3 to 5. And we'll do that 4 times during the year. By the end of the year, if we do that every quarter, we should have nailed all of our 1-year goals. Because every quarter we're looking at what's left to be done and picking off the top 3 to 5 priorities for the next 90 days. When we facilitate quarterly meetings for our clients, the question we ask them is, okay, so what are the 3 to 5 highest priorities for your company in the next 90 days? Which one member of your leadership team owns each of those quarterly priorities? So I want somebody's name attached to each of the quarterly goals from an accountability standpoint. That's what tees up the monthly executive team meeting. So the quarterly meetings are 90 days apart. There's 2 month ends or beginnings within that 90-day period. We use those meetings, half a day typically, for each of the owners of a quarterly goal to come in and give a complete status update on what they own, that project that they own, to the entire leadership team. Hey, we need some more resources, or we set the deliverables wrong. Our goal is when we set quarterly goals, we hit them all every quarter. Not once in a while, not hit or miss. The whole point of this is not to get bad surprises that, gee, we had 5 quarterly goals and 3 of them we missed. That's ridiculous. These are the 3 to 5 highest priorities for the company. How could we let something miss? The monthly meeting is the no surprises accountability meeting. It's our gut check to make sure all of our quarterly goals are on track. And if not, I got the whole team there. Who better to get something on track than the entire leadership team? So the monthly meeting is our no surprises accountability meeting. The weekly meeting, same day, same time every week. 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 8 to 9 a.m. Friday morning as an example. If we knew that we were going to be together every Friday morning from 8 to 9, about 80% of the information I need to share with the team goes in a manila folder, because I know I'm going to be with the whole team in, worst case, 4 days from now. It can wait. It's not urgent. Urgent stuff, I got to track people down. But if you knew that the team was going to automatically be together every Friday morning from 8 to 9, about 80% of the stuff goes in a folder, and you can cover it one time with everybody instead of trying to chase people down. And the only way this whole thing works is if you schedule the meetings a year in advance, and they have to be inviolate. There's only 2 legitimate reasons to ever miss a leadership team meeting. Last minute emergency, or you're on vacation. We don't expect you to call in while you're on vacation. Other than that, you don't miss a leadership team meeting. That's why you know when the meetings are. You got a year to plan for them. Don't plan over top of a leadership meeting. If we start giving up on our leadership team meetings, we will not be as good for our clients as we need to be. This helps us from an alignment standpoint within our organization and our leadership team. Anybody do a daily huddle with their leadership team? 10, 12, 15 minutes max, once around the table, what's up with customers, suppliers, employees that we all need to know. If I got nothing to add when it gets to me, I pass. When the time is up to 10 minutes, meeting's over. This is not a problem-solving meeting. We're not here banging away an hour later. If somebody's stuck or has a problem, who can help them? Take it offline and deal with it. This is an alignment meeting. This is about making sure that everybody knows what they need to know so that stupid things don't fall through the cracks. And after we've had our daily huddle at the senior leadership team level, now people go back to their departments, they have their own little daily huddle. Maybe it's only 5 minutes or 3 minutes, just to make sure dumb things don't happen because things fall through the crack. And I often will get a comment from somebody who'll say, well, we're growing way too quickly to ever meet this frequently. This is way too many meetings. The faster you want to grow, the more you need to meet, because the faster you grow, the more things fall through the crack. So it's just counterintuitive. You want to grow quick, you got to meet more often, not less often. And if you did that whole schedule, and I'm not suggesting you do, you got to make it work for you, not the other way around. But if you met that exactly on that time frame, and assuming you work 50, 60-hour work weeks, that's 5% of a leadership team's time on an annual basis. 5% of our time focused on the highest priorities of the company. I'm waiting. Someday there'll be a team that's going to look me in the eye and say, we're not willing to spend 5% of our time working on the direction of our company. That's a whole different problem. That'll be a really different discussion. Now you can't read this page, but Frank printed up some. That's that little hard copy you've got. It's also full size in what you're going to get electronically from Frank. And if you note, it takes every meeting and defines what we think the ideal agenda should be. And the common theme through all of those meetings, what are the highest priorities for the company? Because that is job one for the leadership team. What are the highest priorities for the company? That's meeting rhythm. No more rocket science than that. Doesn't guarantee success, but not meeting on a regular basis usually means you can't be as good as you could be. That's all. It's all about alignment. Comments, thoughts, questions? Make sense? Okay, so you'll get the digital version along with other slides and the other stuff from Frank. Number 3, Rockefeller habit, metrics. I'll let you read that on your own because I want to make sure we get to the last 2 topics in some depth. Nothing rocket science there. Let's talk about CEO and executive leadership, topic number 3. Companies have to be smart and they have to be healthy. We all know that. That is not rocket science. You need both, smart and healthy. The problem is, smart is pretty easy. You need a smarter executive or leader in any functional area, just go hire one. You can always find smarter people. The problem is companies filled with smart people go out of business all the time. So smart by itself is not the payoff. The payoff is hire and assume lots of smart people, but spend my time working on the healthy side. How do I get all those smart people to work together in a healthy manner? Trouble is, every time I talk about healthy with groups of executives, kind of the reaction is sort of like, oh, that's that warm and fuzzy HROD psychobabble stuff. I don't want to work on healthy. I'll just hire smarter and smarter people. Well, that's a piece of cake. We can do that all day long. But the ROI comes from working on the healthy side. And the message I want to leave with you today is healthy is not squishy. It is not warm and fuzzy. It is not HR's job, and it isn't psychobabble. It's 4 leadership things that we all get paid to do. And number 1, the single most important sentence I could say to you today, build and maintain a cohesive leadership team. That is the most important sentence I will say this morning. In fact, it is so important that I would say to you, if you haven't done that, forget everything else I said because you couldn't get it done anyway. That's how fundamental this is. What do I mean by a cohesive leadership team? No C players in a leadership position. None. 0. Squat. Nada, ever. No C player in a leadership position. Remember, C player is defined as somebody who can't be successful in their current job. Not a bad person. They probably were an A or B player earlier in their career. What's happened is over time the job has outgrown them, just like we were talking about before. 3 reasons why you cannot tolerate C players in leadership positions. Number 1, they can't think strategically. They can think tactically, but they can't think blue sky creatively out of the box at the 40,000-foot company level. When I get a call from a CEO who wants us to lead a 2-day strategic planning meeting, first question I ask, tell me about your team. Because if we're going to go off site for 2 really valuable days of your time with a bunch of C-player leaders, you'll get a plan, but it won't be strategic. It'll be a tactical plan because they just can't think blue sky and creatively out of the box. So C players can never think strategically. So you'll end up with a tactical plan, not a strategic plan. Second reason you can't tolerate C players in leadership positions. C player leaders never hire anything but more C players. They wouldn't recognize an A player if they bumped into one, and if they bumped into one, they'd be so frightened because they're better than they are, they still wouldn't hire them. C players are absolutely intimidated by people better than they are, so they never hire them. And aren't we supposed to be hiring people better than us? I mean, what a travesty that they're willing to tolerate and hire people weaker than they are. So C player leaders hire more C players. And the third reason you can't tolerate C player leaders, every one of your employees knows who the C player leaders are on the team, and they're all looking at us saying, what's the matter with Alampi? Is he in a coma? Doesn't he see what we all can see? Why does he tolerate that C player leader? Everybody knows who the C player leaders are. It is not some big dark secret. But I would contend that circle alone, that sentence, is the toughest thing entrepreneurs ever have to deal with. Because the C player leaders that I'm talking about often fall into one of a couple categories. They were there with you from the beginning and helped you start and grow your company. Or number 2, they're business partners and they own part of the company. Or number 3, they're relatives. Or number 4, they're all of those. They're relatives, they're business partners. What in the heck is tougher than dealing with those categories of people, especially when they're C players? Toughest single thing entrepreneurs have to deal with, okay? No C players in a leadership position. And we talked about it before, you know, what do you do with them? I think we need to be respectful because we're messing around with people's lives and their careers, but we still have to have that conversation. I've sort of developed a pattern that when I talk to somebody about that, hey, Ralph, I've come to the conclusion that you can't possibly succeed in the job we have you in. A career is too precious to waste doing something where you can't be successful. Because of your contribution here, let's see if we can find you another seat on our bus. And if we can't find you another seat on our bus, I'll help you find a seat on another company's bus, but I can't leave you where you are. That's the best I can do. I can try to be respectful about it, but I can't leave you where you are, period. More damage is done hanging on to C players, making excuses when everybody knows they're a C player. And that worst of all, the worst comment I ever hear from a CEO or executive, I know he's a C player, but you know, a warm body's better than nobody. Ugh. God, that's like being stabbed in the heart. Warm bodies are worse than nobody because everybody knows they're warm bodies. They're just hanging on. They're not holding their side up. And because you never can give them any assignments because they never get anything done, you give all that stuff to the A players. So you end up having the A players do twice as much as the C players, and the A players are pissed. And A players do not want to work with C players. They want to be around people that function at their level. You tolerate a bunch of C's, you'll start to lose your A's. It's just a snowball effect. Nothing good happens from keeping C players. Nothing. Still means we have to be respectful about it, though. Question, comment? Agree? Tell me I'm wrong. Anybody had a good experience taking a senior C player out and saving them?
Saving them?
Keeping them. They don't leave the company. Okay, so number 1 on the healthy front, build and maintain a cohesive leadership team. No C players in a leadership position. Number 2, create organizational clarity. Clear vision, clear strategic plan, clear company goals. So every employee knows what are we trying to achieve around here? What is the company trying to do? Number 3, over-communicate the company vision, strat plan, and goals. How many times do you think it takes the average employee to hear something before it usually sinks in and they get it? How many times do you have to repeat it for the average person?
1,000 times.
Whoa. I was going to say 7, so now we've got a bracket. We've established the bracket. You know, most people would say 7 to 11 times before the average person gets it. That means the below average person is 11 to 14 times. And we always underestimate that repetition. Well, we told them, we sent them to training. What are they, stupid? It's on the bulletin board. They must be idiots. Well, that's 2 times. What about the next 7 to 9 times you have to repeat it? And you know, it's every means at our disposal. Email, voicemail, bulletin board, banners, MBWA. What's MBWA? Management by walking around. Exactly right, Doug. And MBWA trumps all the other media combined. When we walk the floors, talk to our people, that has more power, whether it's about core values or company goals or vision, that has more power than all the other media combined. My little admin, Gail, who kicked me in the butt on my second day at the chemical company, she was so funny. She knew how important MBWA was to me. When I was going to be in the office, she'd sneak into my Microsoft Outlook calendar. She'd block out a half an hour. She'd put in there MBWA. When the time rolled around, she'd walk into my office and say something like, "Boss, I don't know where you're going for the next half hour, but you can't stay here." So she'd walk into my office, throw me out of my own office to remind me, get your big butt out of your chair and go walk the floors and talk to people. And you know, we all have the best intention. I'm going to do some MBWA today. And the next time you look at your watch at 6 p.m., everybody's gone home, you missed another day. Schedule it. Put it on your calendar just like an appointment. Half hour here, half hour there, MBWA. And the great thing, being where you guys are here in Alabama, you don't have the problem I find all the time on the East Coast. On the East Coast, you have to join the mafia to do MBWA. Now, I don't know why that is, but as I do MBWA with CEOs and walk around their companies in the Northeast, they ask the same question all the time. How you doing? Now, what do you think the answer is going to be to how you doing? Good, fine. It doesn't tell me anything. When we do MBWA, the point is to ask thought-provoking questions that engage our people, questions that get them to think. Questions like, hey, what's our senior leadership team need to know that we don't know? Or if you had my job tomorrow, what's the first thing you'd change around here? Or that project you're working on today, how does that contribute to our monthly sales goal? Those are the kind of questions that get me some feedback that help me take the pulse of the company. Just walking around and asking people, how you doing today? Forget about it. But you're not in the mafia, so that's a good thing. All right. Number 4, reinforce number 2 with all the human systems. Incentive plans, bonuses, performance management goals, all the things that influence people's behavior are only there for one reason, and that's to help the company achieve its business plan. So many times I'll go into a company and one of the questions that I hear, or one of the comments I hear from the leadership team, we're on target to hit bonus this year. That's not what you're here for. You're here to achieve the company's business plan. And if the company does that, hopefully the company will pay a portion of it back to the people that made it happen. But goal number 1 is not hit the bonus plan. Goal number 1 is to deliver the company's business plan. Then we'll worry about the bonus side, okay? This is out of Pat Lencioni's 2nd business bestseller out of 8. I think it's his best book that he wrote of all the ones he's written, 4 Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive. And when he drew this graphic in book 2 and told everybody this was so important, it struck him. He said, oh, you know, I better write a book and tell people, how do you do this? This graphic in book 2 is what caused him to write book 3, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. How do you build and maintain a cohesive leadership team? And you know, his books are all 60 to 90 minute airplane read, fable style, just powerful messages, good stuff, okay? So the takeaway, hire and assume you got smart people, but spend your time working on the healthy side. That's where the ROI is. That's where the return on investment is, okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So the whole point of today, this morning, is so how do we get from all this visionary kind of stuff we've been talking through right into execution and results? I mean, that's the whole point. Even Collins made the point in his first book, Built to Last, said, you know, visionary companies are only about 1% vision, they're 99% alignment. So rarely do companies win on vision. I mean, when you think about it, how many companies really have something so unique that nobody's ever done it or even come close ever in the history of man? There aren't a whole lot of those. So occasionally that'll pop out, but there just aren't a whole lot of them. What really seems to be the winning move in most cases is, how do I get my entire organization aligned and going in the same direction? That's where the real power is. We think you need two things if you're going to execute really well. First, there has to be a vision, but every CEO's got a vision. Second, there has to be a process to execute the vision. You can't wing it, can't cross your fingers and hope and pray that magically it all is going to happen by itself. There has to be an ongoing process to execute vision. So we've created this document we call the Execution Roadmap. If you would take a copy and pass it on, please. Thanks, Jim. Okay, so this is a fold-over document. When you open it up, core values ought to be in the upper left-hand corner. And I personally believe core values are the single most important element in a company's vision. And I'm going to come back and try to defend that statement to you. This is the core document we use to capture both the short-term stuff, the mid-term, and the long-term stuff when we work with companies. Feel free to write on this document, because when we're done here, I'm going to give you the way to get the original form-fillable PDF version. You can use it forever in your company if you choose to do so. So don't hesitate to write on the hard copy one that you've got. I'm going to give you the path to get to the original form-fillable PDF. So everything you're looking at, core values, purpose, mission, strategic anchors, hedgehog, BHAG, sandbox, value proposition, and brand promise. All of those elements are the potential elements that ought to go into a strategic plan. Now, I'm not a believer that just because somebody in a book said you have to have all these things in your plan. I think you pick the ones that have the greatest impact to you and your company in building a framework so that you can then go out and execute against it. So I don't say that all those things have to be in a plan. And frankly, the last company that we worked with that I saw that tackled all of those took a year to fill out all of them. So this is not a brain dump. It's not checking boxes to have fast answers. What we're trying to get are the right answers. So if that means you skip a couple, so be it. If that means the first year you do core values, purpose, and mission, and from then on, every year you tackle one of these bold header items, nothing wrong with that. So you have to adjust to what your company's needs are. You don't do it just because somebody in a book said you need all these different elements. Strategic anchors, so I'm going to come back and talk about core values. You probably never heard strategic anchors before. Little exercise we like to see a leadership team do to define the 2 or 3 things your company does, none of which are unique, but the way you've crafted them together is what creates your competitive advantage. So the best example I can think of is Southwest Airlines. When they started Southwest, they had 3 strategic anchors. They were going to be on time, they were going to be low cost, and high customer service. On time, low cost customer service. Now, other airlines have done 2 or even all 3 of those. No other airline ever put those 3 elements together the unique way that Southwest did. And it's what created their initial competitive advantage. We like to see a leadership team do that exercise because it gets everybody on the same page about how are we creating our competitive advantage, and then asking the really important question, will that competitive advantage be substantial and sustainable enough for the future, or are we going to have to do some strategic planning? So strategic anchors we think is a pretty good element that ought to be included just to get the alignment within a leadership team. Hedgehog. How many of you remember Hedgehog from Good to Great? I think Hedgehog is the second most important business tool for entrepreneurs, and I'll come back and talk about both core values and Hedgehog before we're done here at lunchtime. But that's the vision stuff, all of those elements. You pick and choose the ones that have the most impact to you and your company. The right-hand column, SWOT, starts to get into execution and results. Strengths and weaknesses that are internal to your company, opportunities and threats that are external to your company. When we do a SWOT discussion in a 2-day strategic planning meeting, it's a good half a day. It is a real deep dive with a lot of debate and discussion and different perspectives and maybe a little positive conflict. And before the meeting, before we hold the meeting, we'll have every member of the leadership team do their own SWOT on the company and bring it with them. And then we'll compile everybody's. So we might have 30 strengths on the list. We might have 25 weaknesses on the list. But you notice we only allow 5 bullet points under each one. So after we've compiled everybody's input, then we'll walk that team through a prioritization exercise and get them to debate and agree, these are our top 5 internal company strengths. These are our top 5 internal company weaknesses. These are the top 5 external opportunities for revenue and profit. These are the top 5 threats to the business. And that discussion is really powerful and really important because they come out of that with the top 5 in each category. Now we got some commitment to where we're going to leverage those top 5 in each category. You can't deal with 25 strengths or 30 weaknesses. And when I see companies going through that, that's a waste of time. Let's get it down to a manageable number, and now let's really focus on those, okay? Once we've done our SWOT, if you flip the form over and look at the backside, left-hand page, you'll see 2 columns, a 3-year and a 1-year. And at the top of each, you'll see a place for metrics. When I get here, my question to the team is going to be, okay, so what's revenue going to be in 3 years? 2019 or 2020, whatever 3 years out would be, what's revenue going to be? And I don't want a budget or a scientific number, I want a directional number. I want somebody to stand up and say, well, you know, 2016 we did 50 million, we can do 80 million in 3 years. Okay, what are you thinking? What would your company have to do to get from 50 to 80 million? What are your assumptions? And somebody else invariably will open up and say, 80, we ought to be able to do 90 million in 3 years. Okay, what are you thinking? It isn't the number that's really important. It's the dialogue that's taking place within your team. What are people thinking your company would have to do to get from an actual fixed done number to an actual future state number? We'll settle on a number as a team, but it's strictly directional for planning purposes. It doesn't become the new budget number. So now I got a revenue number at the top of the 3-year column. What's profit going to be in 3 years? Whatever level of profit you talk about as a team. Gross profit, net profit, pre-tax income, EBITDA, some level of profitability in 3 years. How about productivity, revenue per full-time employee? We typically end up with 3 to 6 high-level metrics with a 3-year horizon. And after we've filled the 3-year column, same metrics, what are they going to be year 1 of this 3-year plan this year? And once we've done our SWOT and set our metrics, now my question is going to be really different. Which of your company's top 5 strengths will you have to leverage? Which of your company's top 5 weaknesses will you have to fix? Which of the top 5 external opportunities for revenue and profit will you have to pursue? Which of the top 5 threats will you have to guard against to have any hope of delivering those kind of metrics in 3 years? So we will identify the 3 to 5 key focus areas for the company that are either a strength we're going to leverage, an opportunity we've got to pursue, a weakness we've got to fix, or a threat we've got to guard against. Maybe broad areas of the company, maybe one word, you know, innovation. We're an innovation company. That's one of our company's strengths. If we don't bring 12 new products to the market in the next 3 years, we have no hope of delivering those kind of metrics in 3 years. Might be a weakness. We've grown so quickly, we've outgrown all of our people processes. If we don't do a better job on recruiting, developing, and retaining our people, we have no hope of getting to those kind of metrics in 3 years. So we will identify the 3 to 5 key focus areas that we're going to have to really spend time on to get to those 3-year metrics. Once we've done the 3-year column, we'll come over to the 1-year initiatives column, and for each item in the 3-year column, we'll identify 2 to 4 initiatives that we're going to tackle year 1 of this 3-year plan. So for each item in the 3-year column, there'll be 2 to 4 in the 1-year column for the short-term 1-year goals. And once we've done the 1-year column, then we'll come over to the right-hand page, top left box, which is Q1, and Q1 will be, all right, so what are the 3 to 5 highest priorities for first quarter to start taking bite-sized pieces out of our 1-year initiatives. We only set 1 quarter at a time, so we don't try to lay out all 4 quarters at the beginning of the year, because new things can pop up and priorities can change. But at the end of Q1 at our quarterly executive team meeting, we'll do a postmortem and hold ourselves accountable. Did we get our top 3 to 5 priorities for Q1 done? Then second, we'll go back and validate that everything on our 1-year list is still necessary and critical by the end of the year. And then we'll pick off the top 3 to 5 priorities for Q2. And we'll go through that same routine every quarter. You see the rectangular box at the bottom left of the quarterly priorities? It's for somebody's name or initials. So each quarter, each one of the quarterly priorities is owned by somebody on the senior leadership team. It's their job to organize it, develop the project plan, set the metrics, and drive it to successful conclusion. And the circles, that's our highly sophisticated accountability process. You see our score key across the top of the right-hand page. You're laughing, Tim. I do too. If you nailed it, we fill in the circle. If you made progress, it's a half circle. If you did nothing, it's an empty circle. And if it became irrelevant, we draw a line through it. So that's our highly sophisticated accountability process. This is the only way we've ever been able to figure out how do you get from all that visionary stuff on the reverse side right down to 90-day tactical goals with accountability metrics, the whole 9 yards. Now, the original document is an electronic form fillable PDF document. All the data fields are set up for you to enter your data if you choose to do so. Where this thing says select current progress, that's a pull down menu. You pull it down, it gives you all 4 accountability scores that you can populate the circles. So you have a permanent running record of accountability at the 90-day, at the 1 year, and at the 3-year level. If you would like a copy of the electronic form fillable document, before I leave today, give me your email address or a card, and later today I'll email you the original document that you can use forever. It's not password protected, so you can use it forever. The only thing you have to do is use Adobe Acrobat. Don't use Adobe Reader because it'll let you fill it out, but it won't let you save the document. And who'd want to waste all the time to fill it out and then lose all your work? So use Adobe Acrobat. If you ask me to and I send you the file, just put the file on your desktop, right-click, open with Adobe Acrobat, and it'll open perfectly. Then you can email it, print it, save it, do anything you want with it, okay? Questions, comments about the roadmap? Does it make sense? Anybody using a one-page strategic plan today? I'm not a big fan of the search for the perfect plan. I think you pick one that works and just use it, whatever, whoever's it is. We think this one's pretty easy to use. Comments, thoughts? Nada?
Do you have one that's already filled out, that's worked?
I do, but I'm not going to give it to you. Now, the trouble is, when we've done that in the past, yeah, I know. Giving samples out is bad because then people glom onto the sample. It's better that you do original work. That's part. The process is part of the.
After I do mine, and can I look at one that's already done too?
Let's talk.
Okay.
Let's talk.
Now, Sue is in one of my key.
Yep. She mentioned. Yep.
What she's asking for is, what we'll probably do next month is we'll have them fill it out before they come to the meeting and they compare with it.
Cool.
Compare it with their other
Good idea.
members in the
Yep.
group.
Yep.
So you'll get a chance to see what other people are doing about that exercise.
Yeah, we've got a lot of Vistage groups that I've spoken to that they use this for their quarterly goal setting, and then the members share with each other so that everybody knows what their top 3 to 5 goals are at the individual member level. So use it any way you can. That's good. All right, let's move on. 2 more things I want to talk about. Core values, number 1, and Hedgehog, number 2. How many of you have articulated core values in your company? Oh, that's great. I know you could all tell me what they are without looking at anything. That's great.
I think, View has an interesting, because he uses an acronym for his. So,
It's the word design,
Cool.
dedicated, enthusiastic, synergy, integrity, goal-oriented, and nimble.
Dynamite. Good for you. That's great.
But
Yeah.
that's really short because there's a lot of sentences behind it.
Yeah. Good for you. I've come to the conclusion after doing this for a lot of years, the only way my people are going to be able to remember core values, they need to be one word, each one with a 1-sentence definition of what that word means in my company, and no more than 4. On a great day, I can remember 5, but I think I'm starting to slip, and 4 is about the limit of what I can remember. And I'm not going to ask my people to remember more than I can remember. So if I can't remember more than that, that's too bad for me. 1 word, 1-sentence definition, no more than 4. When I took over this chemical business, 70-year-old company had no core values. I mean, never even thought about coming up with any core values. So the first thing I did, I got my team together. I said, guys, we got to come up with some core values here. This is 24 years ago. Integrity, safety, customer, teamwork. Those were the 4. Integrity, safety, customer, teamwork. Those are burned into my brain. I will never forget those 4 core values. We cascaded those 4 words down because that's all I wanted my people to remember, just the 4 words. If I could get everybody to know that, that'd be huge. We cascaded those down to 8,000 employees in 110 locations around the U.S. And then I was really curious, how good a job did we do of getting that message down to the lowest level? So I'd go visit one of our locations, I'd wander around by myself asking people at random, say, can you tell me what the 4 core values are? I bet the first 100 people I asked looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. They had no clue what I was talking about. So we had done a horrible job of getting that message down to all our employees. The 101st person I asked stood up, he told me 3 of the core values exactly. Nailed them, perfect. I mean, I was so excited that somebody knew 3 of the 4 core value words. Somebody actually read something out of headquarters. This was a breakthrough day. I was so excited, I didn't know what to do. I remember I reached in my pocket, I found a $20 bill and I gave it to this guy on the spot. And all I said to him was, thank you for knowing what our 4 core values are. Do you know it took less than 1 hour and the message went around the 110 locations that if I came to town, I apparently had a pocket full of $20 bills and all you had to know were 4 words and the dummy will give you 20 bucks. Now, how stupid is that? But it's all part of finding ways to embed those values in the fabric of your company. They need to be easy for our people to remember. They need to be top of mind every day of every week of every month of every quarter of every year. And you know, most companies write such nonsense for core values. I couldn't possibly remember what it says, let alone the average employee. We got to make it easy for our people. I think the reason that they are so critical in an entrepreneurial company, they typically represent the owner's reputation, they represent the company's reputation, they represent your conduct in the marketplace, they represent things you will do and things you won't do, and they represent things you fire people over. You know, in great companies, you violate a core value, you don't work here anymore. We don't give second chances, I don't negotiate, and I don't have to think about it. You knew how important our core values were to me and our company, you violated one, you don't work here anymore. Now, you know when you terminate somebody for poor job performance and another employee wants to know, how come Ralph's not here anymore? There's almost nothing you can say, because whatever you say will be derogatory, probably get you a lawsuit. Core values are a little different. You terminate somebody because they violated a core value and another employee wants to know what happened to Ralph. The best response we've come up with, there was a core values mismatch. That's all I'm going to say. I won't give you any details. I'm not being derogatory. I don't think that's going to earn me a lawsuit. Check with your own counsel, whether that's permissible in your company. But there's a core values mismatch. That's why Ralph's not here anymore. I have now asked about 25 attorneys in this country, including 5 from La La Land over on the West Coast, and all 25 have said that's a legal statement to make. Check with your own counsel. But talk about reinforcing, we take values seriously. That's why Ralph's not here anymore. It was a core values mismatch, okay? So number 1, there ought to be guidelines to behavior. Number 2, that help our people make decisions. You know, our people are on the front line all day long having to come up with answers and decisions for customers and suppliers. The first thing I want them to be able to remember, what are our core values? I know I can't go wrong if I make a decision consistent with our values, but I know I can get fired if I make a decision that violates our values. That's why they have to be short and sweet and people can remember them. Can you imagine this scenario? Can I put you on hold? I got to walk out to the reception area and read that plaque behind the reception with all the flowery language. That's ridiculous. That's not going to work. People need to know them off the top of their head all the time. Integrity, safety, customer, teamwork. Boom. Okay? Number 3, probably most important of all, hiring. Great companies hire and fire for core values. Most companies hire for experience and skills than they fire for values. What gets you hired in most companies? All the great job experience you bring. But then what gets you fired is you don't share our core values. You're out of sync with the way we do things. And the reason this one is so critical, by the time a human being, one of us, is about 12 to 14, we've pretty much got some personal values. They're not good or bad or right or wrong. They're just my personal values. They came about because of my family, the environment, the rules, all that stuff that I grew up under. By the time we get somebody as a job candidate, those values are pretty much locked in. They become almost like DNA. You are never going to hire somebody and then change their personal values. Doesn't happen. So the best you can hope to do is discover during the selection process, what are their personal values and how closely do they align to the company values? Because at least if they align to a degree on day one, they might also turn out to be a good worker. Not a guarantee, but at least you have a shot. But if their values don't align with the company values on day one, they're not going to be aligned on year 20. That individual is going to be out of sync with your company's values their entire career. So we look at it on the basis of this little matrix. Left-hand axis, values alignment. High level of alignment, that individual's personal values are pretty close to the company values. Low level of alignment, they just have different values. And I'm not judging that their values are bad or wrong. They're just different than the company's, that's all. Bottom axis, experience and skills, high level, low level, pretty obvious. So bottom left quadrant, low experience and skills and low value alignment. Why in the world would anybody hire somebody in that quadrant? That ought to be an immediate knockout. Upper right, high value alignment and high experience and skills, superstar. Hire every one of those I can ever find. It's the next quadrant that kills almost every company. Bottom right, high experience and skills but low value alignment. Great companies say not in your life. Because if you don't share our values on day one, you're never going to share them here. You will be out of sync with the way we do things. Upper left side is opportunity box, because you can do that. Cross-functional training, job rotation. You can almost always move people left to right. Virtually impossible to move people bottom up. Virtually impossible. So how do you interview for core values? I had a CEO the other day, he said, oh, I do it all the time. I said, oh, share your group, tell them how you do it. He said, I get the candidate in my office across the desk from me. I tell him, here are our company's 4 core values. Then I ask him, how do you match up against those? No. We're not giving the answers away before he asks the questions. You know, I'm great at all 4 of those things. No, it ought to be good behavioral-based interviewing questions where we're putting the candidate in a position where they have to describe, and when they were faced with a particular values-type challenge in a previous job, how'd they deal with it? Because how they dealt with it before is usually based on how they look at their own value system and a pretty good predictor of how they're going to do it working for us. So questions like, hey, everybody's had to deal with an integrity violation or challenge in their career. Describe when you faced in your last job and how'd you deal with it? And then zip your lips and don't say another word, because I want to hear that candidate walk me all the way through. How did he assess that values problem? What were the alternatives he considered implementing? How did he pick the one he decided to implement? How did he implement it? What was the result of that implementation? So I want to listen to his explanation of his logic and thought process as he worked his way all the way through, what do I do about this values challenge or problem I had as a manager or leader in another company? And those kind of questions aren't perfect, but those combined with some assessment tools and some good behavioral-based interviewing, that's about as good as it's going to get in terms of at least understanding what that individual's coming at and what his value assessment is himself, okay? The best document I've ever come across in terms of how to build core values into your hiring process is actually a chapter of a book. Brad Smart wrote Top Grading. He's the father. His son, Jeff Smart, Geoff, Jeff Smart, wrote a great book called Who, W-H-O. And chapter 2 of Who is all about how to build core values into your hiring process. That chapter is worth the price of the book. The rest of his book, Jeff's book, is all about top grading, the ABC player methodology. But chapter 2 of Who is all about how to build core values into your hiring process. Excellent, really excellent. Okay?
Name one thing.
Say again?
Can you name one thing in there that's,
I could, but I'm not going to.
you're gonna make us read?
But that's not one I want in bits and pieces. The chapter's worth it. It's worth the price of the book. Number 4 on the value of values, performance reviews. How many of you do annual performance reviews? How about quarterly, monthly, all the time, coaching? Yeah. I think there ought to be at least one question in every performance appraisal that has to do with core values. And the one I like is, give me 3 concrete examples of things you've done in the last year to support our core values. Give me 3 concrete examples of things you've done in the last year to support our core values. That's why I think they're the most important thing in a company's vision. Owner reputation, company reputation, conduct, how you say yes or no, things you fire people. I mean, it's like everything. It's the glue that holds the whole enterprise together. Now, Jim Collins wrote a phenomenal Harvard Business Review article before he ever wrote his first book. It's called Building Your Company's Vision. I've already sent the PDF to Frank, so he's going to send it all to you. You'll have it along with the other stuff. And in that article, he talks about something called the Martian exercise. The Martian exercise is the best core values exercise I have ever come across in my entire career. If you have core values today, you and your team, your leadership team, no employees, half a day, you can confirm that the values you talk about are the ones that are really embedded in your company. Because there is nothing worse than us standing up on a soapbox preaching values and having half our employees look at us going, when did that start? If your own employees don't think your values are values, they're not. So you can use the Martian exercise to confirm your existing values, or if you've never had any core values, same deal. You and your team, half a day, no employees involved, you can discover what are our core values in our company. And I've done a one-page PowerPoint slide that's the cookbook approach of how to do the Martian exercise. Frank's got that to send to you as well. So again, if you decide that that would be helpful and it isn't clear, call me, email me. I will not charge you a nickel. Happy to chat with anybody about how to do the Martian exercise. But it is the best, most efficient, quickest way to get the core values I've ever found. And Pat Lencioni wrote a great Harvard Business Review article that Frank's going to send to all of you called Make Your Values Mean Something. How do you make them come alive? How do you embed them in the fabric of your company? How do you get people to really acknowledge and pay attention to the values? So you'll get that automatically from Frank as well. Okay? Comments, thoughts about core values? Anybody found a great way to make them come alive?
We make when we're having a monthly awards meeting, I will have monthly awards, whatever it takes award.
Uh-huh.
We talk about one of them and use an example of somebody that did something. And then we also get them to, at the beginning of the meeting, we go, okay, let's go through them. And they just kind of go, what are the core values? And they don't have to have them in order.
Yeah.
They'll just throw, people in the audience will throw them out.
You know, people have wallet cards and screensavers and banners and things on the bulletin board, and all that support stuff is great, but none of it is what gets values embedded. What gets values embedded is us pointing out examples of behavior that demonstrate the values. Hey, last week when Tracy did X, that's exactly what we mean by our core value of teamwork or whatever else. That's what really gets it across to our people. We had a client the other day, they were trying to up the visibility. They passed an edict. Every meeting that takes place at that company from that day forward, the first 2 minutes is once around the table, and every attendee has to put an example on the table of something somebody did in the last 2 weeks that demonstrate one of the core values. Man, they have upped the visibility and people are talking about them, and now they're getting what that value means, what teamwork means, or anything. Those are the kind of things that really make the difference. All the support stuff's great, but it doesn't replace leaders pointing out examples of behavior. Okay? Anything else about core values? A couple PDFs that Frank will be sending to you. My little thing on how to do the Martian exercise if you're interested. And by all means, if you're really interested in how to build them into your fabric of your company, get a copy of Who by Jeff Smart and look at chapter 2.
Copy of what?
Who, that book by Jeff Smart, chapter 2, that's all about building core values into your hiring process. Okay. All right, one more thing to talk about. Jim Collins' hedgehog. That's a hedgehog. Little mammal, find him in the UK and Europe. Not very big, little guy. Got quills for like a porcupine. They waddle when they walk, so they're not very fast, not very elegant. And over the years, hedgehogs have gotten amazingly focused on basically only doing 4 things in life. They eat, they sleep, they poop, and they make more little hedgehogs. That's all they do, same 4 things over and over and over again. Greatest natural enemy of the hedgehog is the fox. Fox has got a beautiful sleek coat and a big fluffy tail, and he's agile and fast on his feet. Probably smarter than the hedgehog if you could measure animal intelligence. And every day the fox comes sneaking up on the hedgehog to try to have him for dinner. And as soon as the hedgehog knows the fox is nearby, he rolls up in a little ball with the quills pointing out, and the fox can't touch him. And at that point, the fox usually lies down, he watches him for a while, and then he gets bored, wanders off, maybe thinking to himself, I'll come back tomorrow with a new strategy to have Mr. Hedgehog for dinner. And when Collins wrote Good to Great, one of his observations was those 11 great companies he wrote about acted a lot more like hedgehogs than foxes. They figured out the fundamental answer to their success and survival, and they stayed laser focused doing those same things over and over and over again. Whereas the fox was more like the 11 non-great companies, the comparison companies that never did become great. He was always looking for the strategy du jour, or the silver bullet, or the magic wand. You know, I've been looking for the silver bullet for about 25 years. I haven't found it yet, because there aren't any. It is just hard work doing what you all do, running businesses. And the reason I think this is so critical for entrepreneurs, one of the attributes of really great companies always know when to say no quickly. They never waste precious resources chasing stuff that doesn't make sense. On the other hand, there are millions of good companies that never know when to say no. It's almost like a badge of honor. We're entrepreneurs. We would never pass on an opportunity. If we passed on that opportunity this year, it might not be here next year. Entrepreneurs get so caught up that we have to chase everything. And you know, the reality is, any idiot can say yes. It takes an astute business person to know when to say no. Now, if you have unlimited resources, by all means, chase everything. But there's the rub. How many entrepreneurs have enough resources to chase everything? Not many. And if you don't, I think Hedgehog is one of the best filter systems I've ever found to know when do you quickly say no so you don't waste precious resource. The questions are real simple. You know, what are you passionate about? What kind of work? What kind of customers? What kind of products? What kind of quotations? What is it gets people really juiced up? Number two, what can you be best in your world at? So can we is a future state, doesn't necessarily mean today, but in a future state. And world here doesn't mean the globe. It means your world, your sandbox, wherever you've chosen to play. In that space, what is it you can truly be best at? And three, what drives your economic engine forward in a positive direction? Usually expressed as profit per something, so you got a yardstick. And as you evaluate new opportunities, quotations, whatever, you can put that new one up against your current running rate, and the new one better be at least as good, if not better, than your current rate, or you're going backward. You're degrading your economic engine. So here comes a quotation, a new customer, a new product line, anything. Is that the kind of work you're passionate about? Can you be best in your world doing it? And does it drive your economic engine forward in a positive direction? If you answered yes to all three of those, no brainer, I'd chase that the rest of my life. If you answered no to all three of those, why would you waste even 1 second messing around with it? And if it isn't a clear yes or no, now it's our job as a leadership team to debate it, discuss it, and decide, is this close enough to our sweet spot that we ought to chase, or do we quickly say no and move on to something else? Best example of Hedgehog, I think, in good to great, of the 11 great companies, Walgreens, the drugstore. Phenomenal example. Their Hedgehog is all about customer convenience. So everything Walgreens does in a store, they test and measure against, if we had that customer in our store, what kind of products and services might they be interested in buying from us while they're in the store? As a result, about 90% of all the Walgreens stores in this country are on the corner of an intersection. Not any corner, the corner of that intersection that lets the greatest number of cars make the least number of turns to get into their parking lot. They actually go out and measure traffic flows and demographics to figure out what's the right corner to be on. And you ask, well, what does that do for customer convenience other than turning the steering wheel? Do you know if you walk through the front door of a Walgreens that's on the corner of an intersection, you can almost guarantee there's only one of two floor plans. And there's two because they're mirror images depending on the way the store sits on the corner. But you go through the front door, you can almost guarantee the photography counter is either directly to your right or directly to your left. The prescription window is back right of the store or back left of the store. So here I'm in a strange Walgreens I've never been in my entire life. I already know what the layout is. I know where the aisles are. I know where the functions are. Who had the first prescription drop-off window from your car? Walgreens. Back when cameras still had film, you wanted to get prints made from your film, you had to send the film away. Who had the first in-store self-serve print machine? Walgreens. And now look at the stuff they're doing. Paramedical activities, blood pressure testing, flu shots, shingle shots. Some of them have a physician on site. All of that stuff tested against, will it add to or enhance our customers' convenience to shop at our stores? I don't think they're ever going to sell automotive tires. I don't think that fits in with the category. But that raises the question of the worst example of hedgehog in good to great. One of the 11 great companies went Chapter 7 liquidation in the last 3 years. Electronic retailer, who was it? Circuit City, absolutely. So Circuit City was one of the 11 great companies, and they're gonzo. Did you know Circuit City owned CarMax, the used car superstore? Can you tell me what the synergy is between selling electronic retailing DVDs and a used car? You know, hey Wade, thanks for buying that DVD. You want to go over here and get a used car maybe? Even if you put the stores next to each other, zero synergy between those two businesses. 3 CEOs ago at Circuit City, the guy had a passion for automobiles. It was about the time that Wayne Huizenga started AutoNation, the other used car superstore. The guy at Circuit City had been looking for a way to diversify the business. He looked at that and said, oh, you know, there's room in the market for 2 used car superstores. We'll go start one. No knowledge, experience, and skills whatsoever. Total distraction for his executive team. You'd think you'd buy somebody if you didn't know anything about the business. He did a greenfield and built it bottom up, brick and mortar the whole way up. Totally screwed up Wall Street because now they couldn't figure out, who the hell are you people? Are you a used car lot or are you a electronic retailer? Every bad thing that could happen happened with this guy's plan. So what happened? The parent, $8.5 billion public company went bankrupt, out of business forever. And CarMax is still going along, but I don't know how they're doing. But I mean, just dumb. And you think, well, wait a minute, isn't innovation what entrepreneurship is about? Aren't we supposed to be innovating? Yeah, but it's smart innovation, not that kind of stupid innovation. I'm a huge fan of innovation for entrepreneurship because I think that's one of the fun parts of doing it. But if that's the core of your business today, I think when we innovate, we ought to be leveraging our knowledge, experience, and skills. We ought to be leveraging and pushing the envelope out, but we ought to be taking off from the things we already know and are good at. What we're trying to identify with Hedgehog is this guy. It's high risk, it's high cost, it doesn't leverage anything we currently know or do. All Hedgehog does is put some boundaries around, we're going to innovate like crazy in here. We see this one come down the pike, there would have to be an unbelievable justification to spend any resources here. This is probably the one we ought to look at and go, let's take that energy and put it up here and leverage it like crazy. That's what Hedgehog is. It's a quick way to know when to say no so you don't waste precious resources chasing stuff that doesn't make sense. And my last war story today has to do with a CEO I met in Detroit a number of years ago, and he had an engineering company, $30 million business, engineering. And we were talking, I'd never met the guy before, and we finally got down to the point, I said, well, what's your big, hairy, audacious goal here? What are you trying to be? And he said, I want to be $1 billion company. I said, wait a minute, you're a $30 million company last year. No, don't you think you should be a $100 million successful company first? He said, oh no, we're going to do $125 million this year. I said, wait a minute, you did 30 million last year, you're going to do 125 million this year? He said, yeah, we got that much backlog, it's in the system, we're going to bill 125 million. I said, have you ever billed 125 million before? Nope. Has anybody on your leadership team ever been in a business or run a company at that volume? Nope. How about your IT system? Is it checked out to be able to handle that kind of volume? No idea. How about your business processes? Were they designed to be bulletproof at that volume? No idea. We got to the end of the conversation, and I said to him, I predict you'll do 125 million once, and next year you're going to be a $30 million company again, because your team doesn't know how to run a business like that. You have no idea about your IT system. You're business processes aren't bulletproof. Well, of course, after he got through calling me every name in the book and swearing at me and telling me I was a freaking idiot and all the other stuff, we parted ways. I was wrong. He went 30 million, 125 million, 25 million the third year. Almost put his company out of business, lost 2/3 of his leadership team because they didn't know how to run that size business, broke his IT system halfway through the year. They had to go back to paper and pencil ticket processing, blew through all their business processes, got sued by the federal government over 2 jobs that he couldn't finish, got banned from 3 bid lists that represented about 80% of his business, all because his ego was he didn't know when to say no. He was so enthralled with more revenue. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I've ever put revenue in my checking account. And people get caught up in revenue as the metric. It's not the metric. It is a metric. And there's a whole lot of other metrics I better be pretty sure of before I decide what we're going to do and before I start saying yes. So there is no honor in saying yes just to be bigger. In fact, Collins made a comment, I think his quote was, bigger is not greater. You're not greater just because you're bigger. So, all right. So where do you start? Big surprise. Smart and healthy every day of the week. And you know what number 1 is? Build and maintain a cohesive leadership team. Single most important sentence I said today. So we talked about 4 things today. We talked about the barriers to growth, where they occur and why they occur. We talked about the Rockefeller habit, setting priorities at the company level and cascading them down, having a good meeting rhythm and the right kind of metrics. We talked about CEO and executive leadership. Hire and assume you've got smart people. Spend your time working on the healthy side. That's where the ROI. Get everybody working together on the healthy side. And last, I introduced you to the execution roadmap that may be a way for you to capture not only the vision part of your business, but more importantly, an ongoing process to execute it. 2 offers. 1, if you'd like an electronic version of the roadmap, give me a card or email address and I'll send it to you later today. 2, anything I talked about that wasn't clear, you have a question about later, hey, pick up the phone, call me, email me. I will not charge you a nickel, and happy to chat with anybody about any of this stuff we talked about. And last, hopefully you see why I call this an execution tune-up. You know, in 18 years of talking to Vistage groups, I have never once suggested you have to replace the engine in the car. If that's what you're having to do in your company, that's a turnaround. That's a whole different ballgame. What I'm talking about is tuning up components, most of which you probably already have in your car. There's a lot better ROI tuning them up than replacing the entire engine. So spend your time on the tune-up side, not on the replacement. Thanks a lot. Nice being with you today.